Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the astrology of May 2023. I hope that you're doing well out there on this Saturday afternoon, shaking up the routine a little bit, doing things on a weekend. Maybe there's some new faces that are joining us here today. I'm just going to welcome a few of you in the chat. Thank you so much for being here today. Happy Taurus season, right? One of my favorite seasons of the year. Just love Taurus seasons. I feel like the pace that my life and my energy goes at is very Taurian. I do have the moon in Taurus, so that makes some sense. But hope you're having a lovely Taurus season wherever you are at. Welcoming Rachel Fletcher here. Happy Taurus season. Sending love from Roanoke, Virginia, and recovering from COVID. Oh no, Rachel, I'm sorry. I hope that you're doing okay out there and recovering quickly here and healing up. So sending you some positive vibes today. Jody is here. Jody says, greetings, Spencer and friends from South Florida. It's sunny and beautiful here today. Hope you feel better. Rachel, yes. Yeah, getting some good sunshine. It's a little rainy here today in Michigan of the Midwest of the United States, but that's what feeds the trees and the flowers and all of that and makes them grow beautiful. Rachel is here from Ireland. It says, hi from Ireland, friends. Good to hear you are recovering, Rachel Fletcher. It is such an unpleasant illness. Take your time and take good care. Yes, take your time. Friends, we've still got some challenging weather out there as far as this illness and whatnot. So I hope that you're still able to stay healthy and heal up if you have a challenge there. Beth is here. Hello, EK Beth. Nice to see you. Excited to plan out my month. Yes, we got a lot to cover, especially for us fixed risings here, Beth. There's a lot that's going to be a lot of action in the fixed risings. Mortal and Wild, Carol is here. Hello, Carol. How you doing, friend? Edwina Horn is here. Glad to make the live show today. I'm glad you can make it as well. And Remco, our friend from the Netherlands, is stopping by today. Nice to see you, friend. Okay, so we're going to have a good day today, I hope. And we're going to go through a number of things with the Astrology of May, as we often do. We're going to settle in for a few hours. Remember, this is kind of the slow burn channel, I guess. So if you're into that kind of thing, settle in and we'll have a nice chat. Hello, Michelle from Scotland, and Raven is here. Hello, friends. So what we'll do today, we will go over some of the big picture thoughts. We will look at the lunations, the ingresses, the stations, the solar phases, out of bounds planets. We will go over each solar decan, and I'll show you one of my slides from the Decans of Taurus, which is on sale right now for 20% off. So you can see that in a link to the video if you want to get 20% off the Decans of Taurus webinar. Part of which I will show you today. We're going to talk a little bit about the first decan of Gemini, in addition to the last two decans of Taurus today. And then we're going to start going a little bit day by day through these particular aspects, the full moons, the new moons, and some of the major non-lunar aspects of the month. We do have a big T-square that's happening with Jupiter, Mars and Pluto this month, which should be interesting in the fixed signs. Jupiter's changing signs. We've got a full moon lunar eclipse. We're in the middle of eclipse season here, so that's interesting. There's a Mercury Cazimi. Venus is out of bounds. We're just going to be going and doing all sorts of interesting explorations today. So if you are a fan of the show, and I'm so grateful that you're all here today, do me a favor, quick favor. Hit the like button on this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Share it with your friends. Make sure you sign up on the email list. That's the greatest way to get in touch as far as new classes, new offerings, new webinars, figuring out when I'm going to go live. All of those things are in the newsletter. I usually send that out about once a week. And thank you, Michelle, for the super sticker. That's the other thing you can do if you want to support the show. There's a little $sign in that chat. It's called a super chat or a super sticker, and that helps me to keep the lights on here. So I appreciate that. You can also buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. Okay, my friends. We've got more friends joining us. I love this. I love that we're trying out new days and new times just to see if more friends. Shazandra Goodwin is here. Happy to have the opportunity to join live. over here in Southwest Michigan, fixed sign rising. So curious and excited for May. Shazandra, nice to see you. Shazandra was a friend that did one of my first in-person astrology classes. So I'm glad to see you, friend. I hope you're doing well. A fellow Cancerian, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. Rachel says, good to have you here, Remco. Yes, Remco, I'm glad you're stopping in today too. Remco does some moderating for us here on the show, so it's nice to have a friend looking out in the chat. Okay, let's see. A's Creation, how you doing, friend? Okay, so we've got all sorts of good folks and friends, and if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. If you have an interesting observation, we'll see what we can add to the conversation as a whole as well. I've got some tea. I've got some mate tea with a little bit of peppermint in there. Got one of my little fancy pea protein shakes, a glass of water, my talking rock, lapis lazuli if you're curious. And I've got a Saturn-themed charcoal-colored hoodie on today since it's Saturday instead of Friday. So let's go through the big picture thoughts. So let's start with these lunations. We recently had a new moon solar eclipse in the final degree of Aries. So that was this past week. Hopefully you've all survived that, and some interesting things are starting to unfold. If you want to get more information on that, I took that eclipse through the houses in my last new moon live stream. So you can see that through the lens of your rising sign. We're in the middle of what is called the Bardo period. It's kind of a fancy word for an in-between space or a liminal space where we're, everything's kind of up in the air right now. Things are being reevaluated. There's lots of changes that are taking place, or the potential for change. Oftentimes eclipses work on us instead of us working the eclipse. Oftentimes you'll see a lot of manifestation literature or things coming out around new moons and full moons. Eclipses are sort of wild cards in that regard. A lot of the times we just have to kind of buckle up and see what changes are going to be presented to us and what chapters of fate we're going to be asked to embrace next. So stay flexible around this period of time. Explore, be curious, try to take good care of yourself in this in-between period of time, because we are going to have another eclipse on the 5th of May. We'll start out the month with a Mercury Cazimi on the 1st. Jupiter will emerge as a morning star around the 1st as well at 26 degrees of Aries. So a lot of the things that you saw at the Jupiter Cazimi on, I believe it was April the 11th, some of those things are going to start to be visible around that period of time in the beginning of May. We're going to have the Sun conjoining Uranus on the 9th. Venus is going to move into Cancer this month. Jupiter is going to move into Taurus. Mars is moving into Leo. That's happening with Venus moving into Cancer on the 7th. Jupiter moving into Taurus on the 16th. Mars moving into Leo on the 20th. And then the Sun moving into Gemini on the 21st of May. We, of course, have that full moon lunar eclipse on May 5th. We have a last quarter moon at around the third decan of Aquarius, 21 degrees Aquarius on the 12th. A new moon in the third decan of Taurus, 28 degrees Taurus on May the 19th. And then a first quarter moon at 6 degrees of Virgo on May the 27th. In addition to the other solar phases I mentioned, the Mercury Cazimi at 11 degrees of Taurus on the 1st, Jupiter emerging as a morning star, and the Sun conjoining Uranus at 18 degrees of Taurus on the 9th, Mercury will also emerge as a morning star at 6 degrees of Taurus on May the 12th. Now, we also look at out-of-bounds planets, which, if you're not familiar with out-of-bounds as an astrological concept, they are going to be basically outside of the jurisdiction of the Sun. There is a fancy astrological term called declination, which is how high or low the Sun rises at noon. And when planets move outside of that range of astrological latitude, they are said to be out of bounds. So they're not really acting as they normally would, in alignment with social expectations. So Venus is going to be out of bounds all month. So It goes back in bounds on June the 1st. And so you might be attracted to things that are outside of the norm. Your taste may be a little bit different than normal. Relationships that don't necessarily fit into social expectations may arise. We have to be a little careful around out of bounds periods so that we don't get into trouble with any of that. But we are also coming to the end of Mars out of bounds, which I think is kind of good news. I think anytime Mars is out of bounds, sometimes we can overdo it with getting into conflicts and things like that. So Mars will be out of bounds from the 1st of May to the 4th, and then it goes back in bounds. The moon's going to be out of bounds from the 6th of May to the 11th, and then the 19th of May to the 25th. And then finally, we have a couple stations. So we are starting the month off with Mercury retrograde. Mercury is retrograde as I record this right now. It stationed retrograde, I believe, yesterday at 15 degrees of Taurus, and it will station direct at 5 degrees of Taurus on the 14th of May. Pluto at the very beginning of the month will also station retrograde at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So maybe some of the bigger macrocosm changes are going to be up for review, social changes potentially. So that's your big picture. We're going to be exploring a hexagram and an animal as well. So that should be closer to the end of the show. But we'll buckle in here for a few hours, take some breaks, have some snacks, just hang out. This is our weekend astrological exploration. I'm going to take a look at the chat again since I'm seeing a lot of activity there. Just nice to have all of you here with me today. KP 1231 is here from Cleveland. Hello Cleveland. Nice to see you. Shizandra says, yes, sun and moon in Cancer, rising Leo. Spencer is a great teacher. Oh, thank you, Shizandra. I appreciate it. Shizandra is a fellow Leo rising Cancer sun. So yeah, we probably have some things in common for sure. Remco says, looking sharp, Spencer. Yes, this is my capsule wardrobe Saturn day with this isn't a true black, it's a charcoal black. And then I've got a little charcoal shirt and little lapis and malachite to give me a little pop of color. There you go. There it is. Okay. And I've been moisturizing. If this isn't the most Taurus season thing ever, I got like this new like face moisturizer. I don't know. It's not something I thought about in the past, but you get into your 40s, you start to see little wrinkles. You're like, oh yeah, maybe I could use a little moisture. so hopefully it's working out. So thank you, Remco. Yes, Ani says black for Saturday. Yeah, so black is Saturn's color, and we're honoring Kronos today, Saturn, and pleasing the planetary gods, so to speak, or just coming into alignment with their energy a little bit. It's a little bit of a different vibe on Saturday than when we do these, often on Friday with Venus's day, and you see me in my big green hoodie. It's a little different vibe. Jody says, I'm always attracted to things outside the norm. Well, maybe you have a out of bounds Venus, Jody. And you have your Mercury is always your your trickster. That's okay. Okay. So friends, let's start with Taurus 2. So for those of you who aren't familiar with my work, I did recently, about a year ago now, a deep dive into the decans. And I'm going to share my screen to show you a little bit of what that looks like. This is one of the slides from my Decans of Taurus webinar. You can see like we've got all sorts of fixed star types of things here. We're talking about the tarot, angular triads, myths, Europa, the White Bull, Pasiphae, Aphrodite, House of Venus. Talk about Beltane, happy Beltane on May the 1st here. It's a really fertile time. I love some of these Taurus themes, fertility, fructification, which is, the earth getting ready to be planted, natural instinctual forces, rhythms, cyclical time, generating things, having patience, all of those things. So these are kind of I did this on May 14th, 2022. But what we're going to focus on first of all And you can purchase this at the store on my website, spencermichaud.com. And again, it's 20% off until the end of Taurus season. We talked about Taurus 1 in the Astrology of April. So if you want to see the deep dive I did into that, you can check that out. But that's basically like a planning period. We're in that now. So this is a great time in the end of April, if you're still listening to this in April, to be able to just start making plans and to start figuring out what resources you have at your disposal and how you want to move forward. I know I spent most of the morning kind of thinking about maybe going on a trip or something, like getting out of town for a few days, and what resources do we have at our disposal, and how do we prioritize our responsibilities with our with the way that we seek pleasure. That's a Taurus question that comes up quite a bit, is, how do we enjoy ourselves and balance out work versus play? That's a really important part of the Taurus season equation. So you can see here, the second decan of Taurus has some synchronicity with the Six of Pentacles. So we're looking at the Taurus cards as 5, 6, and 7 of Pentacles. In this card, we see a wealthy benefactor giving out alms to the poor. So there is a dual theme in this card and in this decan about sharing our excess and through generosity, but also perhaps receiving help. Taurus is a yin nocturnal sign that is very receptive, like the earth. The earth is very receptive. It is becoming ready to receive the seed so that it can produce something to maturation. And I want to say too, happy Earth Day. We're recording this on Earth Day. Yeah. I think that Jody's pointing out there's a new book, wait, Earth Grief by Stephen Harold Buhner. Oh, he's a great writer. I have another book by him called Ensouling Language that I really like. I'll have to check that out, Jody. That looks cool. Belinda is here from Australia. Hello, Belinda. Nice to see you, friend. So yeah, happy Earth Day. And I hope that you're able to get, some connection with your natural environment today, or if you've already gone for a walk, or maybe you're taking us with you today out on a walk or something like that, just touching the earth and getting your hands dirty a little bit. But again, Taurus is a very receptive sign, and it is a fixed earth sign. So it is something where we're seeing something in the very middle of a season where the spring has been established in the Northern Hemisphere, and we're starting to think about how to infuse our passion, our ideas, our seeds into a receptive, fruitful earth. So generosity and altruism are themes in the second decan of Taurus that we're going to be seeing from May the 1st through May the 10th. Okay. So establishing a consistent rhythm, that's interesting. As a Taurus 2 moon myself on the midheaven, you all see a lot of moon in Taurus 2. You get a firsthand look at this decan through the way that I express myself on this channel. So one of the things that I think is important about Taurus 2 is that there's a slow and steady rhythm to this decan. It's really not rushing the process, showing up, doing just as much as necessary for that day and that time, and then letting nature take over the second part of it. There are pregnant pauses in the second decan of Taurus, plenty of snacks, and like making sure that all of your senses are accounted for, that you have food, sleep, love and affection. All of those things are important for Taurus too. But that rhythm is really important. And various planets do better or worse in this decan. Like, so for example, the moon is exalted. So I have an exalted moon in this decan, which means that the moon is a planet that creates fertility. It's related to the body. It's related to the emotional state. And Taurus really, it tends to stabilize the otherwise very changeable energy of the moon. So to be able to consistently grow a garden and produce things that are of high quality, you need to show up regularly. You need to show up, do the work, And then you also need to rest. The earth needs to rest. We've been talking about this in my guided group study class, where we're examining ecology through the flowering wand. We have a really nice group. A few of you are here today. Really enjoying getting to know everybody in that group. And we're talking about the challenges of like social challenges of like living in a Western capitalistic society that is sometimes it's very difficult to find time to rest because it's not something that's really built into at least American culture. Maybe European culture has a little bit more of that built in, but in America, resting is almost like a, you know, like a character flaw, which I find very frustrating, because it's so necessary to create healthy rhythms and to produce healthy, nutritious things in this world. And I mean that on a physical and a spiritual level. If we're constantly exhausting the soil through overworking it and not allowing it to rest, it just doesn't produce anything that gives us any vitamins or sustenance anymore. It's just empty calories. So think about that metaphorically in your life also. How can you do the work that you need to do? Show up, do just enough. Don't overwater, don't overwork the soil. Don't yell at your plants to grow or your projects or whatever it is. But then how can you build in the necessary rest period as well? Okay. So this is associated with Tiferet, which is the Sephira in the Kabbalistic tree of life that is also related to some systems of tarot. And that's a very central place on the Kabbalistic tree. It's all about balance. So here we're balancing body and spirit. We're balancing work and play. We're balancing action versus, rest. So appreciating the present moment really helps us. When we are present, we know what needs to happen in that moment, rather than thinking about, oh, we're going to do this so this happens in the future. Oh, we better do this because this happened in the past, type of thing. And slow and steady manifestation. You're really not going to rush Taurus anything. And that can be for good or for ill. Like another planet that does less well in Taurus too, or any place in Taurus, is Mars, right? With Mars being in its exile in this particular place. Mars wants to take action. Mars wants to get moving. And the challenge of inertia with Mars and Taurus is that sometimes it's hard to get up and get moving when Mars is in Taurus, and other times it's hard to stop. So that's a dual lesson if you have a Mars in Taurus, is how can you become more consistent? Mars tends to disrupt the gentle consistency that happens in this decan. And often if you have more Mars in Taurus, I feel like I have a few clients here today that do have Mars in Taurus. It's not necessarily like your fault. I think that this is something we tend to like take on blame for some things in our chart sometimes, especially with Mars though. Mars often brings us misfortune that is random. Mars is a planet related to 2K, which is a random distribution of fate. So oftentimes with Mars and Taurus, there's just things that come up in your life quite often that take you out of that consistent, gentle rhythm. And I think learning how to roll with those punches with Mars in this particular area are important too. Not that we have Mars moving through Taurus in this month, but I just wanted to give you kind of a something to compare, like a planet like the Moon in Taurus versus Mars in Taurus. Okay, so questions you can ask yourself in the first week and a half of May. What seeds are you sowing? What routines will support your growth? Can you work with the natural cycles to create fertility? What virtues practiced over time will lead to success, right? So this is something where like oftentimes Taurus is not just about, the things we physically value, but like the ideals that we value as well. What tangible achievements have you manifested? Sometimes we have to acknowledge how far we've come. It's very easy to get lost in all the plans that we want to make in the future. But part of being in the moment and the appreciation, the gratitude that is so important in any Venusian season, in life in general, but especially in Venusian seasons, is how do we appreciate what we already have? which is one of the secrets to be able to manifest more of it. Like if you appreciate that the assistance that a friend gave you, that's going to make them more inclined to want to help you in the future. Whereas if let's say you Mars it and you like don't appreciate it, or you complain about the help that you got, it's going to drive that assistance away. So that gratitude is so important. And also, how can you share your abundance? This is a Taurus challenge as well. I think that if we have had moments of trauma and scarcity in our past, it can be very easy to want to hold on very tightly and try to control our physical environment during Taurus season. I know I had challenges with this as a young person and still struggle with it sometimes because of the amount of changes I had when I was growing up. A lot of different households and environments. My parents split up when I was really young, and my parents were both married a couple different times, and just my environment was always changing. That I had certain things that I was very stubborn about. Like I had a blanket that, was like a Linus blanket that if I didn't have it, it was a real problem. And I also was very attached to certain clothing items. Like I would wear my shoes until they would just be falling off my feet. If you have a favorite item, sometimes you'll just wear it till it's threadbare if you have important Taurus placements. There's a picture of me when I was maybe 4 with a full snowsuit, a full snowsuit in July, which in this area it gets pretty hot in July. You can see how red my face is. I have a cowboy hat and like a ginger ale, and I'm sitting on the couch like just in full snowsuit gear. And I was told that I couldn't be talked out of it. Like I was very, very insistent that that's what I wanted to wear that day. So you can think of like having some sort of physical armor or something you're attached to, especially if you're going through some challenging times. So it's oftentimes when we start to heal from that, we start to have faith in the universe to provide, and our grip on the physical reality starts to loosen. Especially with relationships, even trying to control people around us, but especially in regards to things. I often find I feel the most healthy when I'm able to get rid of stuff. Like I have a last quarter moon in my chart, so being able to get rid of things feels very healthy. If you study lunar phases, oftentimes you can see that, like if you have a waxing moon, you may be more skilled at bringing things into being. Whereas if you have a waning moon phase where the moon is already past the full moon and starting to lose its light, part of your skill set involves, moving on from things. That's something that I've noticed in my life, is that I've had to move on from a lot of things. And how do I do that gracefully? And that might be part of your story as well, if you have a last quarter or a balsamic moon or something of that nature. Okay, so that's Taurus 2, the second decan of Taurus. Austin Cobbett calls it a linga yoni, which is like a fertility stone in certain cultures, right? So like being able to have that rhythmic, kind of tantric energy can produce fertility. Yeah, Jody is confirming Mars and Taurus like friction for driving with the handbrake on. Yeah, definitely. That can. Yeah, Remco says that is so Jody has natal Taurus in the 5th house retrograde, and Remco is talking about friction driving with the handbrake on. So yes, very good descriptions. Ani says solid advice and good timing. Don't Mars it. Have gratitude. Yes, gratitude, so important. Beth says, I'm wearing a wool sweater today that I've had for years. I mended it many times and it's still full of holes. I cringe when I look in the mirror, but it's so comfortable. I'm with you, Beth. I just recently replaced that green hoodie that I've been wearing for literally 30 years. That the zipper just finally gave out. It had holes in it, and it was terrible. But I believe Beth has a Taurus rising, so definitely Taurus energy in the house. Okay, so let's go look at the chart. Okay, you can, if you want to get more in depth into this, you can see the spirit of this decan is the Horai, or the goddess of the seasons. We've got some fixed star energy, and we'll get to Taurus 3 in a minute over this show. But let's look at the chart. So we'll pull the chart up here and we'll go through the first 10 days of May. And then we'll take a little stretch break, a little snack break. So here you see the chart at the very beginning of May. A couple things I want you to just to really pay attention to. First of all, we're starting that month out with a Mercury cazimi at 11 degrees of Taurus. And a cazimi is when a planet is joining with the sun, conjoining the sun exactly, and sort of being reborn. So this is a retrograde cazimi, or an inferior conjunction. I've often heard this described from one of my favorite Mercury experts, Gary Caton, as this particular phase, the retrograde phase of Mercury, and it being under the beams of the sun and invisible, which it is in this case, as Hermes, or Mercury, in its psychopomp phase, which is a fancy word for a guide of souls to the underworld, or the guide of the dead. So we may be going in the first week of May very internal and looking at our how we give and receive. What type of, are we overgiving? Are we oversharing? Are we being stingy? Those are things that we could be asking ourselves. Mercury is a planet, and I think an energy that asks us questions. It casts things into questions. I've been mentioning that this decan of Taurus also is related to giving and receiving benefits. It could be like government benefits, like your health insurance or something like that, or like SNAP benefits. So those things are up for review with Mercury retrograde, which is probably happening for a lot of people right now because the COVID emergency was ended by the United States government. And even though obviously we have a friend in the chat today that is recovering from COVID, so it definitely still is out there and still a problem. But in the government's eyes, it is, they didn't want to keep extending the emergency. So a lot of people are losing their health insurance right now because there was a expanded Medicaid benefit for people during the pandemic emergency. There was also extra money for food for people who are struggling as well. So a lot of people are going through that right now. And you might not have that specific circumstance, but there might be something else in your life where you're really reevaluating how you are giving and how you are receiving. And you might get some really important information around the 1st of May as well, which is Beltane, if you celebrate, which is a fertility holiday. So happy Beltane on May the 1st. The other thing that we were talking about and alluding to was Jupiter emerging from the beams. So you can see here that we recently had Jupiter taking its turn in the heart of the sun, like Mercury is doing here. I think this is a really, really fascinating handoff where we have Mercury cazimi at the very beginning of the month, just as Jupiter is actually showing us visible, tangible evidence of the types of things that may have been begun when it was in the heart of the sun, or cazimi, around April the 11th. So I want you to pay special attention to that Aries area of your chart, looking for some Jupiterian manifestations. You might also see something, especially regarding the Sagittarius area of your chart, coming to light as well, and potentially the Pisces area of your chart, because Jupiter is going to be providing resources for both of those houses. Although Jupiter is in what is called aversion to Pisces, which basically means it can't witness that house. And in Hellenistic astrology, witnessing by an aspect, by a traditional aspect, was very important for that planet's ability to provide resources for that topic. So in this case, Jupiter might not be able to provide resources for the Jupiterian topic in your life, but it does have a clear line of sight to the Sagittarius house. So focus on those two houses, I think, in particular, for something that might come to light. I know for me in particular, just an example of this, I have a Leo rising with Jupiter in the 9th house and Sagittarius on the 5th house. So I could potentially, as a Leo rising, see something in regards to either my children or my personal creativity, like a belief system type of shift. I've been feeling lately a lot that I'd like to get back to doing some creative things with music. I've been missing music quite a bit, and I've been appreciating music. I've been listening to a lot of music lately. For those of you who haven't seen my Instagram stories, yesterday I just went on a journey with Depeche Mode, one of my favorite bands. Oh my God, I love them so much. Those are they are a very Taurus band to me. So if you want a band for Taurus season, Dave Gahan, the lead singer, is a Taurus sun. I believe Martin Gore is a Leo sun, the other main creative force in the band. One of their members recently passed away, and they just released a new album after a few years. They've been consistently productive. See, like very Taurus, like just consistently producing over the long term. But they put out a new album. I believe it's what is it? Memento Mori. I think that's what it's called. I don't know if I'm even pronouncing it right, but there's this song. It's called Ghosts Again. That is just oh man, it is a jam. And it's one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs. It's one of my favorite Depeche Mode songs since like Enjoy the Silence, which I could listen to over and over and over and over again. For me, it's just like, I'll just put that on loop. But I listened to that song on loop yesterday. It's just so good. And I think Depeche Mode in particular is at its best with a little bit of grief, when they're grieving the loss of one of their founding members. And they just produced a real masterpiece. There's another song I like called Soul with You that Martin sings that just gorgeous. So check that out, because it's they have a new album out. And I've been appreciating that and be like, oh, maybe I should start singing again, and maybe I'll bust out my vintage 80s synths. I have a few of those in the closet that I got at some garage sales back in the day. I've always wanted to do more synth music. I was always a solo acoustic guitar guy, but my heart is really in 80s synth pop. Yeah, we've got some other Depeche Mode fans here. Remco says, might be a good idea to have a music break during the lives as well as a stretch break. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll have to practice a little bit more, because the Leo rising in me would be a little embarrassed to just bust into song without practice, but we'll see. I wish I could play copyrighted music on YouTube without getting in trouble, because maybe we just all push the play button on Ghosts Again and just jam out to it. It's so good. Okay, so again, that was a long-winded way of saying in a Leo rising chart, you may be starting to feel a new energy around your fifth house, right? Like I was doing here. So look at the connection between Aries and Sagittarius, because there might be a new start coming in that area, those areas in particular of your life, to start the month, which I think is really important. And you might have some really good ideas how to put it out into the world with the Mercury Cazimi. The other thing that's happening on the first day of May is that our good friend Pluto is turning retrograde that day as well. Not as big of a deal as some of the other retrogrades, in my humble opinion, mainly because it happens for, roughly half to a third of the year, every year for these outer planets. But we might start to see this kind of happening where we've seen a lot of changes happening in our social circles, and especially with things like both climate change, artificial intelligence, technology. We've had a lot of stuff in the United States around reproductive rights and all of these things. There's a lot of union things going on. There's so much news coming, like gun control, all this stuff there's so many social changes where a lot of people are trying to reevaluate what it means to live in a society. And there's a lot of difficult questions that people are asking because we're dealing with a lot of difficult challenges. And it feels like that there's a lot of changes that are coming very, very quickly. I think some of those changes could start to slow down a little bit with Pluto stationing retrograde. Remember, this is a very slow moving outer planet. This is, Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years or so. It will dip back into Capricorn this summer, and then move into Aquarius for good for the next few decades in the middle of January of 2024. So just keep an eye on that. And if there's been people that have been calling for like a pause for like AI development and things of that nature, I find it ironic that like a guy like Elon Musk is one of the ones that was like, maybe we should pause this and blah, blah, blah. Whereas there's also information coming out where he's trying to develop his own AI thing that is, much more in alignment with his political views. So it's like, let's stop the AI that isn't in alignment with his weird political views, and then like so he can make his own. There's just I don't trust that guy at all. So if you want to know what I think about him, I don't like him, and I think he's destroying Twitter and all sorts of other things. And he's weird. Like he just has a lot of weird, out of touch beliefs, and I'm not a fan. So if I'm sorry if you're a Musk fan, but I think he's dangerous. But anyway, we may see some things start to move backwards in that regard. So keep an eye out for that in the beginning of May as well. We are also still dealing with these planets. I'll just give you a lay of the land here. We still have Saturn slowly moving through the first decan of Pisces, challenging us to think about our meaning in our life. Think about how we put ourselves, how we shape our reality through the stories that we tell ourselves internally and how they manifest in reality. What dreams are motivating the actions we take in the world? Which one of those are fruitful and productive and worth pursuing? And which of those dreams or internal dialogues are actually keeping us from what is in our hearts and what is our higher self? So Saturn is helping us to figure that out. It's concretizing things that are worth pursuing potentially, and bringing death to some dreams that weren't ever practical in the first place. So both of those things are happening simultaneously. We also are seeing Mars still moving through its fall in Cancer. So we may be having some stress around domestic challenges. Like Mars likes to create conflict in our safe spaces, in our places where we usually look for security. Could also be messing with our bodies, because in the house of Cancer as a lunar house, could be creating some extra inflammation and things of that nature. The good news, I think, about Taurus season, though, is that Mars, a fallen Mars, is not the host of the sun anymore. And because that could really add some extra challenges, right? Now all of the Taurus planets are hosted by Venus. The only problem with that in the beginning of the month is that Venus will be in aversion to the sun and Mercury. It's not able to provide resources. But Venus will move into Cancer on the 7th. Okay, so we'll probably get a boost to both your Cancer and your Taurus areas of life around that period of time. Okay. Questions, comments. Let me look through this chat here. Everybody loves Depeche Mode. Ani says they saw Depeche Mode on their Clean tour years ago. Yeah, I saw Depeche Mode in like Grand Rapids, Michigan at like Van Andel Arena during the Angel tour. I think that's the name of the album. I didn't know them very well as a band. I knew they're like big 80s hits, but my friend was a huge Depeche Mode fan. He's like, I got this extra ticket. You want to go with me? I was like, hell yeah. But I didn't really understand how amazing that was. And I wish I'd known their music a little bit more. But since that time, that was 25 years ago at this point. I've become a much bigger fan. Violator is my favorite album. I could just listen to that over and over and over again. Okay. Jody says Pluto moves for 20 years into my second house. I'm scared, but I have no planets there. Well, Jody, I don't know if it's something to necessarily fear. Pluto does tend to bring up fears in people, often because what it will do is it will expose something that's not working. And I think that the best way to deal with Pluto energy is not necessarily to fear it, but to accept the fact that there may be some things that we haven't dealt with that need to be dealt with. And to go through those changes willingly can bring a lot less stress. A lot of the anxiety and stress that we have is from either ignoring a problem, not being willing to deal with it, or to be like just bracing for the impact of it, right? Think about like if you, there's always this kind of thing like falling off a horse. If you fall off a horse and you go limp, you'll injure yourself less. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know like if you rear end somebody and you tense up all of your muscles in your knees, you're probably going to tear something in your knee versus, being loose in that moment, you might avoid a serious injury. So that's a roundabout way of saying, ease into the changes, accept the fact that there will be some changes that you need to make in that area of your life, wherever Pluto is at. And also, it's a very long-term influence. So it's not going to be that you have to make every single one of those changes overnight. But I do think some things are up for change around that period of time. But Jody, if you're super worried about second house, I mean, Pluto is also a word for like a god of wealth under the ground in Greek culture and ancient Greek society. So maybe there's some gifts and treasures that you can unearth potentially in that area of your life as well. A's creations feeling like they're going through it already. Yeah. Maybe he will bring riches, Jody. Yes, exactly. Ani says, you just gave me hope for May. These changes seem promising. Yeah, there are some good things coming in May. There's also some sticking points that we'll go through, and I'll try to help you navigate that. The eclipse is a little funky, and the T-square with Jupiter, Mars, and Pluto could be a little bit tense. But this is true for a lot of times in life. I mean, there's always a blend of challenging energy and beneficial energy. And I think that one of the things we have to do with astrology is every single aspect isn't going to affect us equally. Every single negative, square, opposition isn't going to be a major crisis in your life. Some of them will feel intense, but others will just pass and you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And, so trying not to get too high or too low when we're talking about all these astrology things. And the same goes for a good aspect, like thinking that, we've got a Jupiter Cazimi, that means I'm going to win the lottery or something like that. That's not probably the best approach either. So that's part of being present, is how do we respond to the good things in the moment and the challenging things in the moment, rather than bracing for it or fearing it or getting super worked up about it before it happens. I do think it is important sometimes to like have vigilance if we're getting prepared for what could be a challenging time, practicing self-care and things of that nature. But if we're going into a month or an aspect with fear, that can actually be counterproductive. I'm telling this to myself too, because there's an aspect in the end of June that's like, there's the Mars Uranus square at the end of June. It's exactly on my natal ascendant. I'm like, oh no, what's going on here? But again, we'll just live into the answers, right? Okay. Yeah. Ani says, it's less stressful to face the issues, chip away at methodically, Taurus out. 100%, friend. 100%. Okay. So you're getting kind of the overall vibe. Still might be some challenges in the household with Mars here. Venus is asking us to explore options, although Saturn is in the overcoming square to Venus still by whole sign, which means that we may not be able to explore every single possibility the way that we might want to. Okay, some of those dreams, some of those thoughts where we might be overthinking something, Saturn's like, don't overthink it, just flow, right? I think that's the main thing I've been thinking about, I'm feeling about, I've been exploring with Saturn and Venus in this square, is oftentimes, when we overthink something, it just brings up too much anxiety. And I don't know about all of you, but my experience of Saturn in Pisces is like, it's okay to just be today, right? I don't have to think about every single thing that is on my plate and on my list. It's okay for me to just really enjoy this song right now, really enjoy this sandwich. I live with a 5-star chef who makes like really amazing meals every day. I'm so blessed. I'm really fortunate. And sometimes I'm just like, wow, this is an incredible meal. Like I'm so lucky. And just enjoying those little moments that you have in your life, whether it's a good meal, a good song, a flower outside your window, a lot of those things are free, so if you just go on a walk and notice the beauty in your neighborhood, or a body of water if you live near that, all those things can fill your soul up. And that's really very much a Piscean thing, I think, is being in that flow state instead of always having to rationalize things, right? Okay. Tarja T is here from Helsinki, Finland. Nice to see one of our Finland factions stopping in today. Nice to see you, friend. Okay. So that's what Venus is doing. Again, Jupiter is making its emergence as the morning star. And if you're wondering what that means, I'm just going to show you. I'm going to go forward a few hours and just show you what it looks like. Here's a little teachable moment. If I put the sun on the ascendant, okay, this is roughly when the sun rises in my location, Ypsilanti, Michigan. And you can see that Jupiter has risen by primary motion, clockwise motion, before the sun. If you go out in your local area at dawn around this time, you will begin to see the bright star of Jupiter, or Zeus, at dawn. It's visible once again. Okay, when it was under the beams, the light of the sun was too bright to be able to see that star in the sky. So that they call this a moment of phasis, an omen that speaks. Maybe in ancient times, if they were considering this the deity Zeus, and maybe even modern times, the reappearance of that benevolent god was important. It was like some good fortune coming back, right? If Zeus had disappeared, that was probably like, oh no, Zeus is gone for a while. But now Zeus is there again, and we can appreciate that. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. So that's now Jupiter is the morning star. It rises before the sun. And that's actually another condition in Hellenistic astrology of it's what's called a rejoicing condition. This is something that I've learned from studying Demetra George's work and from my studies with Nightlight Astrology and various other authors. A rejoicing condition is a secondary type of dignity, I guess you could call it, that where a planet is more or less able to do its business. And Jupiter, being of the day sect, of the sect that is related to the sun, which includes the sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, and sometimes Mercury, depending on whether it rises before or after the sun. It likes to be in the solar hemisphere, the hemisphere that is above the horizon. Okay, so this is a rejoicing. It likes to rise before the sun. Okay, so Jupiter things in your life might start to go a lot better around this period of time. Okay, especially Aries and Sagittarius. Just look at those areas in your life and say, oh, things might start moving forward, and be really blessed again in that period of place in my life. Sabrina is here, says Jupiter is on my rising sign in my natal chart. Well, Sabrina, you are very lucky indeed. Having the star of Zeus in an angular house, sort of like having a guardian angel, where things just seem to work out for people that have Jupiter on an angle, whether it's the ascendant, the midheaven, the descendant, or the IC. It's just someone that's looking out for you, So good luck with that, although you probably don't need it. You probably already have that good luck, Sabrina. Okay, other things on the 1st. That's pretty much the gist of May the 1st. Let's start moving forward again now that we've kind of gotten the lay of the land here. Okay, I'm going to go back to my daily. I'm going to move this to noon, roughly noon each day, so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on. So we move forward through the first few weeks. We're starting off the month with a waxing moon, heading towards the eclipse on the 5th. Okay, we're in the middle of eclipse season, so things are changing. Things are in flux. We get to the 4th. 4th is an exciting day because we're going to start feeling the eclipse energy because the moon is starting to get very full around this period of time, and it's moving into Scorpio. But the best thing that's happening on this day is that Mars is starting to move back into bounds, at about 21 degrees of Cancer. So this is something where Mars is finally starting to play nice once again. So this is something where if we've been having a conflict with somebody that's been really out of control, maybe potentially with someone in our family, if your mom or your dad or somebody, a maternal figure in your life is still around, you could be having some beef with them. Maybe things start to smooth out a little bit around this period of time. Things come to a head because we have the eclipse happening as well. This eclipse, I think, is we're going to be seeing a reduction of emotionally intertwined relationships. Something's just coming to a head or potentially ending where we maybe are a little bit codependent in a certain situation. And I think that we're going to have to start moving a little bit away from that energy at this eclipse. And I'll break that down in a little bit more depth in a second. But the other thing that's happening as Mars moves into, the domain of the sun, I guess the domain, the under the rule of the sun via declination, not by host or anything like that. Although it will move into that domicile of the sun in this month. But I don't want to confuse you with too many technical terms. But the other thing that's going on this day of May the 4th, May the 4th be with you, is that all of the nerds will be out in their Star Wars regalia. I include myself in that. I don't know if I'll be dressing up as my favorite Star Wars character, but I definitely love Star Wars and appreciate people who have a passion and are passionate enough to be able to create that reality in their own life. So I use that term very lovingly. But we have a Venus-Neptune square on this day as well. And it's in the third decan of Gemini and the third decan of Pisces. And oftentimes Venus-Neptune aspects, they're kind of magical. They are a little bit where we're just seeing just this transcendent beauty in the world. Our reality could be slightly distorted with a square energy. We have to be careful on this day as we get to eclipse season that we don't have unrealistic expectations. Does that make sense? I think that it is very easy to hold the people that we care about in our life to unrealistic standards. And that could be part of the challenge of this eclipse with the square of Venus and Neptune, is that we have this vision, Neptune in the third decan of Pisces, the 10 of Cups card, if you're familiar with the tarot, with the big rainbow and the happy family dancing underneath it. And we have Venus in the third decan of Gemini with the guy with 10 swords in his back, like the defeat, where we have to, that card is really about making a choice. Like not every possibility can be pursued. And I think that in trying to create this beautiful dream vision, we may have to make some sacrifices and we might not be able to pursue every single possibility. And I think if you come to terms with that around this eclipse, a lot of the painful experiences about having a relationship or something like that is very intermeshed end or something like that, you might be able to avoid the worst of that manifestation through just being realistic about your expectations for the other people in your life. Oftentimes we put a lot of pressure on our relationships to fulfill every facet of our needs, our desires, our projections, heal our traumas, all of these things. And I think that it's dangerous to put too many eggs in those particular baskets. And I think that could be part of what we're experiencing here. The other thing is beginning on May 4th is this really interesting mutual reception between the moon and Mars. And we had one of those last month as well, as the moon moved through Scorpio last month and Mars moved through Cancer. So this is the second kind of mutual reception. So this is something where something beneficial might come through some challenging circumstances. They are exchanging houses, sort of like you have a friend that is staying in your house and you're staying in their house. Now, both of these planets are in their fall, so they're both in domiciles they're not super comfortable in. So that could be like you're staying in your enemy's house. I don't know, but you know that they're staying in your house, so you're not going to mess their stuff up because you don't want them to mess your stuff up, and you have this like handshake agreement about it. Like, if that makes sense. But still, there's still some good things that can come out of that type of relationship with two planets in their fall, where they're just not super comfortable. I'm just looking through the chat here, just keeping an eye on that. Yes, Sabrina says, I've been told I'm very lucky. An angel for sure. An angel for sure. Good. Yeah, Jody says Mars never plays nice. Well, yeah, that's true. But I think there's ways to use that energy to direct it in a productive way. There's going to be some stuff that's just out of our control that we have to deal with that's uncomfortable with Mars a lot of the time. But like, here's an example with Mars and Cancer. I'm a Cancer sun, so Mars was in my domestic area. So instead of getting in a fight with my family, I bought a chainsaw and I started cutting up wood that was on my property so that to clean it up. And I think that that's sort of almost like a Mars propitiation on some level, where you give Mars a job. Mars says, I want to cut something in your house or in your domestic sphere. And I'm like, okay, well, let's cut up this giant dead tree. And I think that gave Mars a job. And that can be a way to utilize that energy more efficiently. You can also do what's called planetary charity. And if you want to learn more about that, there's an amazing astro mage. What's his name? Christopher. Oh, geez. My dumb brain isn't going to pull it out today. I want to say Christopher Walken. That's not his name. Come on, help me out. I know there's a 20-second delay here. Who's the astro magician that talks a lot about planetary charity? Somebody has to know his name. Well, sorry, friend. I know I even have a bunch of his books on my shelf. Let's see if I can jog my memory loose. Warnock, that's what it is. Christopher Warnock, who also did a translation of the Peacock tricks. Can you tell that Mercury is retrograde today? Just station retrograde over my natal moon. So Christopher Walken wrote the Peacock, a translation of the Peacock. Oh boy. All right. Christopher Warnock, who translated the Peacatrix, also has a lot of books and articles about planetary charity, which is a way to I don't know, sort of propitiate the gods. I did this once when I was in a Mars perfection year, and what you do is you do your Orphic hymn or your prayer to Mars on this day and time, and then you also do some kind of like charitable donation to some kind of organization related to that planet. So in Mars's case, I did a period where I was donating a certain amount of money that was around a number that was sacred to Mars to the wounded warriors, like which helped support soldiers and things of that nature. Or you could do I think Tanya did that, and I did Doctors Without Borders, which is also like they use scalpels, they cut things, they're surgeons, right? So that could be a Mars propitiation. And like, say if you want to do something with Saturn, you can donate to like the elderly or something like that, or some people that have fallen on hard times. So there's ways around this stuff if you're thinking about that. Yeah, Raven. Of course Raven got it. Star Student Raven on Twitter. Check her out. Yeah, Aaron says Christopher Warnock as well. Good. I knew that you would figure that out. I know that. Sorry, my brain's just making connections today with this Mercury retrograde on my moon. Maybe I'll be a little slower today. Carly's just said, I just did a talk an hour ago and forgot so many words for things. Well, thank you, Carly, for helping me feel better that it's not just me right now. Oh boy. Okay. So as we get to the 4th, we have that Venus-Neptune square. Be realistic about your relationships. Realize that you're not going to be able to pursue every single option. Okay. Try not to get blinded by too many options, right? This is one of the painful parts of Gemini, I think, is that, yes, it can be beneficial to explore with Venus in Gemini, or any planet in Gemini. I put on a little bit of Gemini Mercury oil today, so hopefully we're keeping the retrograde errors to a minimum, potentially. But I don't think that we have to do everything all at once. I think that the way to do Gemini well is to explore, but then for the specific purpose of choosing. And there's a transition that happens with Gemini to Cancer, is you have to kind of switch directions, let go of some of the options, much like one of the twins had to sacrifice some of his immortality so that the other slain twin could live. So there is some themes of being able to infuse life into your most important priority. That's what the Gemini exploration is all about. It's not a permanent state. It is a transitory state. So when you're working with Gemini energy, don't try to just say, oh, I'm just going to be exploring, indefinitely every single possibility at all times. Explore so that you can choose something to bring to maturation, like we do in Cancer season. We're gestating something, we're supporting it, we're helping it grow. Okay, so this is something that's, if you have a lot of Gemini in your chart, it's okay to focus on one particular thing in the moment. Doesn't mean you can't change your mind later. That's okay. But try to bring as many things to as much of a fruition as you possibly can, because that's gonna help you trust yourself more. A lot of Gemini folks have a lot of self-doubt because they're like, oh, just when I'm ready to bring something to fruition, I'm going to change my mind, or I'm going to get distracted, or all of these things. You will create self-trust and trust with others when you are able to commit to your highest priorities. Doesn't mean that you can't communicate well the things that you've found to be true in your explorations. It's another part of the Gemini journey is being able to communicate your findings and get people excited about it, right? To make connections from things that are seemingly disparate elements. Okay. Oh, Aaron's got a good suggestion. If you have Mars in a Venus-ruled sign, may I suggest your local domestic violence center? Okay, yeah. So that would be Mars in Taurus or Mars in Libra, doing some planetary charity related to women and being able to alleviate that suffering. So that's good. I like that. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the 5th, and we'll kind of start looking at our eclipse here. So here's our eclipse day, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. Be careful on this day. You could overdo it a little bit with the moon in its fall if you celebrate those types of things. So here we have the opposition between the sun and the moon. And it is near it is near the nodes of the moon. So in this case, the sun is near the north node, K2. It's at 14 degrees of Taurus, and the north node's at 4 degrees of Taurus. And the south node is at 4 degrees of Scorpio, and the moon will be at 14 degrees of Scorpio. So an exact opposition. So, hold on a second, I'm just getting all my windows arranged here. Oh my goodness. Let me figure this out here. I have too many windows active. I'm trying to make sure I can see all your chats as I'm doing this. So we go back to this eclipse, and what happens on a full moon lunar eclipse is that the moon will block out the light. The sun. Hold on a second. Come on, brain. At this previous new moon solar eclipse, the light of the sun was blocked out. And now at the full moon lunar eclipse, did I say lunar or solar? New moon solar eclipse, the sun is blocked out. Full moon lunar eclipse, the moon will be blocked out, which is interesting to me. because then what we're doing is we're shutting off the body, we're shutting off maybe the emotional and intuition nature. Sometimes full moon lunar eclipses, to me, and I learned this way back from this, I don't remember what these, you remember those like Sydney Omar prediction books? Like, yeah, this is like a way back in the day. Talked about eclipses like that psychologically. And I think that it can give us some clarity where the sun is something that sheds light on something. And when we're taking the moon out of the equation, our attachments, our security attachments aren't really necessarily interfering with that clear solar picture. So this is something that I think that we're experiencing as well. And thank you so much, Jody, for your super sticker here today, saying that they have to, oh no, that you have a sick brother. Okay, well, Jody, bless your heart and your beautiful Cancer moon. You got some people to take care of. So nice to see you here, Jody, and I hope that your brother is getting healthy there. So thank you again for the super sticker. So when we see an eclipse, we in this case, the south node, K2, is kind of swallowing up the moon, right? It is digesting the moon, I guess it would be a more appropriate description of it. When we have a Rahu-centered eclipse with the north node, we sort of have the dragon swallowing up the sun, okay? And now we've got like the body of that dragon processing all of it and crapping it out. so we release things that are really important releases, I think, during full moon eclipses. And in this case, this is happening in the Scorpio area of our chart. So this is why I was hinting at releasing codependent relationships, old forms that we are hanging on to too tightly. Maybe we are feeling really a heightened sense of security or self-protection that is excessive that we need to let go of around this period of time. Scorpio is an energy of being able to defend the dying breath, the dying life force. It's like, this is the nocturnal Mars at play, right? Where it says, I'm going to, you've backed me into a corner and I'm going to, be efficient because I'm already like on my way out. I need to have one strike kill, right? It's not like a Aries battle where you can just like, be like the brute that's just swinging in all directions with all the collateral damage. Scorpio energy is like a ninja where it's just like, okay, I'm an injured ninja and I need to find the quickest strike to kill you so that I don't perish myself, right? So that's one part of the energy of Scorpio. So we may have to release some of those feelings of like, oh my God, I'm in danger and I need to, protect myself at all costs. That could be one manifestation. The second part of this, and this is something that you learn with the decans, is we have the Six of Cups energy opposing the Six of Pentacles energy. So the Six of Cups related to the second decan of Scorpio. And in 36 Faces, Austin Coppock's seminal decan work or book, he talks a lot about, I believe he calls it mutual distillation, where two elements are coming together to be able to squeeze the last essence out of something before moving on again. So we also consider this card a nostalgic card if you're looking at this Six of Cups, right? Where you see like this kind of childhood memory or something of that nature, nostalgia for something in the past. So we may be revisiting something in our past at this full moon eclipse, but it isn't a permanent revisiting. It's something where we're trying to just get the most out of it before we discard that old form. Okay. Now the good news, if it gives you anxiety about like, oh no, I've got to let go of something. The transition between Scorpio and Sagittarius is a nice one. Once we've liberated ourselves from a form that isn't providing any nutrients anymore, that energy, that essence is free to find a new form. It's liberated to find a new goal, a new mission, a new body. Okay. And think about this. The Scorpio season is like the the decay point in the fall, right? Where everything is decaying. All of those nutrients have to go back into the soil. It's very important to release things back into the earth. Or we're just trying to keep an old form alive that is a husk of its former self. We all do this. We all get attached to something that we're trying to keep alive that really no longer is part of our life. And all sorts of challenging moral conundrums can come up in some of these Scorpio decans, the third decan in particular, if we're trying to keep things alive that have already passed their expiration date. Debauchery is the name of that card in particular. So try not to hang on too tightly to the material form of things during this eclipse. Let what needs to pass through pass on. Again, there's the mutual reception between Mars and the moon, and Mars is the host of this moon. So there might be some old energy feelings that come up, but maybe even just some clarity around your feelings, because the feelings part of it is maybe taken out of the equation. The old feelings are being released. That will bring you a new sense of clarity that the sun would provide uninhibited by the moon. The Mars in the third decan of Cancer would suggest some of the themes around scarcity versus abundance, feelings of like, I'm just over this, right? Like there's a boredom that comes in this decan where it's, you see a figure in the Four of Cups that is sitting under a tree and just kind of has his arms folded and he's like, I don't know, I don't want any more, right? He's just like, I'm bored. I don't want it. This isn't bringing me joy anymore. Divine discontent. But that moment is really important. I have Mercury in that decan. Often I will feel a sense of divine discontent. And I know that to trust those moments now, because it's sort of the moment before a breakthrough. Instead of trying to just blow everything up in my life, I know that that feeling is what precedes inspiration, right? The transition from the end of Cancer to Leo, passion. So this is sort of a pregnant pause, I think, a letting go, clearing the decks before we're going to start moving forward once again. There's also a fixed star that this moon is going to be near, called Zubin el-Janubi. And Zubin el-Janubi is one of the ancient claws in Scorpio that has since become, in our more modern viewpoint, the scales of Libra. And this is, I believe, the southern scale or the southern claw, which the Arab astrologers deemed insufficient price. Okay, which means that there's something that is imbalanced. There's something that's not fair that is going on. There may be a relationship where you're giving too much or where you're taking too much. And an awareness of that, a releasing these imbalanced relationships, could be a really important part of this lunation and this lunar cycle. Mercury's still going to be retrograde. It's going to be starting to separate from the sun, from that Cazimi moment, heading towards, I believe it's heading towards the north node there. Venus isn't really helping, and Venus is the host of the sun. Saturn is sextile and trined the moon. It's sextile the sun and trine the moon. So, there may be, it's not really bringing us damage. Mars isn't really damaging this lunation either. It's not like it's a square to Mars. So I don't necessarily think this is going to be a crazy, painful eclipse. I think that the release that you're heading towards, you probably will have seen it coming for a long time, and you're just ready to let go of it. And it's not like it's this big, like huge, super conflict-orientated thing. It's just like I've seen that coming for a while. It's time to move on. Let's finally release this. So keep in mind that there's harmonious aspects with the malefics to the both of the lights in this. Okay, so that is the eclipse. The other thing that's happening on that day that is potentially helping okay, that is part of the good news of the eclipse. These full moons in Scorpio are always a little bit challenging. I went back and looked in my journals for the last few years, and there was some stuff going on. And I have this is angular for me, so this pray for me on this one, because this is going to be pretty much exactly on my IC axis and my natal moon. The sun will be, and last year around this full moon, my great aunt passed away, and I was also dealing with the death of my mother in the previous lunation cycle, and then my grandfather passed away like a week after my great aunt or something like that. So there's a lot of letting go with a full moon. So I hope that that's that my family members stay intact, I guess, but it doesn't mean that someone's going to die. But it definitely, if you have it angular, there could be some times where you're either revisiting or letting go of something. The good news about this eclipse is that we do have a fortuitous sextile between Venus and Jupiter. So when those benefics are in harmony with one another, and also Jupiter is really, really trying to help all of the Mars and Cancer stuff in the beginning of the month as well. Whenever Jupiter is in overcoming square to another planet, or a benefic is in an overcoming square, I believe that ancient astrologers would call that being upon the 10th, which is a very fortuitous position, 10 signs away from that planet. And the benefic is really, really trying to help ease the negativity of that planet. So through our ability to win people over through our charisma, through our finding humor in certain situations that Jupiter is asking us to do, we might be able to ease some of the tensions that Mars is bringing to our domestic situations. And then the sextile with Venus just means that, I think that we're able to become more independent as we explore different options. It's probably good for, unifying some of the disparate elements in our life where we're, if we have a lot of things that seem like contradictions, we can kind of unify them into a collective or productive whole around this period of time. And Jupiter is just adding passion and fire to our ideas during this full moon eclipse as well. Everybody gives the warning that, like, don't charge your crystals on an eclipse. That's probably good advice. Eclipses are wild cards. I tend to do there's like a ritual that Caitlin Kopic put out from Sphere and Sundry that helps propitiate either Rahu or Ketu, and we do that in this household during eclipse periods. And I close my blinds in the actual eclipse time. You don't really want to stare into it or bathe in its light. But I think that if you're just kind of respecting the eclipse rather than like going out and saying, here, all my crystals are out underneath it, or, oh, I'm going to try to start something really important during this eclipse, that's probably not the best way to use this energy. Again, let eclipses work on you rather than trying to work the eclipse, and then you'll find that you'll probably come out of it a lot better. One thing I noticed too, which I think is really interesting, I don't know if you all have had experiences with this, but during eclipse season, I always see more mythical creatures come up in like my feeds, like in like Instagram feeds, like in news stories. And at the beginning of this like new moon solar eclipse, I saw a lot of advertisements for Bigfoot. I don't know if anyone else experiences that, but maybe it's because there's just some sort of portal open to another dimension where like, I don't really always like that word portal because it's abused in spiritual circles. But I do think if there's any energy that could be described as a door opening or a portal opening, these eclipse periods are that, because they used to consider the north and the south node either the gates of the gods or the gates of men, where souls would enter the physical plane or exit the physical plane. And maybe there's just like we're getting a little peek into some sort of other reality potentially around these periods of time. I've always been fascinated by the Bigfoot thing. I've been fooled a couple times by some Bigfoot sighting things. I want to believe it's real. I want to believe that there is a giant humanoid like ape that still hasn't been found. That would be pretty darn cool. But who knows? Looking through the chat here. Looking through the chat. I'm just looking through my notes too about this eclipse. I think we talked about Zubin el-Janubi. They also talk about Burnett Brady talks about paying your dues, maybe giving too much, like where we're not receiving the right, compensation for what we're giving or something like that, or balanced energy. So just keep your eye out for that, and then try to fix that imbalance through bringing something back into equilibrium and back into harmony. Okay. So I'm looking through the chat here. Some nice comments here. Ani says, I don't know if you should encourage a Gemini to change their mind. I think that that's just part of who you are, right? And I think it's okay to change your mind sometimes. I will say that the reason I was really fascinated by how my astrology teacher, Adam Ellenbos, talked about this. And he pointed out that in Gemini season, that we mistake Geminis as being super fickle and childlike and things like that, which they can be. But I think that there is an ambition to Gemini because of the sun's rising towards the summer solstice. But what's very fascinating is once the sun reaches the solstice point and shifts into Cancer, it switches direction. So this is really the ultimate outcome of Gemini, is a change in direction, right? The sun begins to rise lower in the sky. So this is one of the reasons we can see like this change of mind. The other thing that has really changed my viewpoint on Gemini in particular, and we'll talk about this more as we get to the first decan of Gemini, but it is it does have some associations with the 12th house and the Thema Mundi, which is not a lighthearted house at all. It is a liminal space in between life and death, where there might have been choices that have had to be made, especially when we consider the myth of which is a Platonic teaching device about a Roman soldier that dies and maintains his memory and sees how the afterlife works and how people choose lots to be able to reincarnate into a new body and a new life. And there's a lot of pressure, I think, that would be involved about choosing a moral life and making the right choices. And a lot of times Geminis can get really stuck because they're weighing all the possibilities. They see the pros, they see the cons, they see all of the possibilities. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just would say I wouldn't try to get stuck there. Again, it's a transitory energy. So we want to utilize it, but we don't want to get stuck in it. We don't want to craft our entire existence around that. And if you're a Gemini sun or something, you're like, well, that is my life. And it is how I identify. I will tell you what I've heard our good friend Austin Kopik say, who is a Gemini moon. His mother, he tells this story about how his mother told him, he was like, I want to explore all the different lives and all the different things. And she was like, well, you can just do them one at a time, right? Be in the moment was what she was basically saying, and then if you want to switch to something else, that's fine. And as a Gemini Venus native myself, my goal as a young person was to be a Renaissance man. I was like, I want to do all these different things. I want to be a musician, an athlete, like a philosopher, I want to travel and see the world. And then you start to come into relationship with some of the limitations of incarnation and responsibilities and commitments. And in my case, being a parent was a big part of my life where I had to make some choices and sacrifices, but things circle back around. You see what I'm saying? Things can shift back to places where you can manifest once again a vision that may have been long dormant in some case. All right. Carol says the Sabian symbol for Scorpio moon is the telephone lineman at work, which is interesting as it opposes Mercury. Oh boy. Well, that is interesting, Carol. I hope it doesn't mean that we're losing power or communication or things like that. I have having some flashbacks right now to my week without power and internet. So I hope that that's not our manifestation here, but it could be. We have a lot of we have a lot of weather issues that have been coming up lately. I've definitely been noticing the severity of our weather patterns picking up and the frequency of extreme weather picking up. And that's really part of the reality we're going to have to deal with moving forward, especially with the Pluto in Aquarius generation and age here. A. Well, we'll see you the next time. A is gonna have to watch the replay. Speaking of internet connections coming in and out, yeah, Hermes is gonna play a little bit of tricks on us here, but yeah, take care, friend. Ani says release is the perfect way to describe K2 in Scorpio. Yes, and K2 or the South Node is moving through that first decan of Scorpio right now, which is encouraging us to grieve our losses and to ritualize our mourning and to release some of the things that are, holding us back, maybe even if it's a bad habit instead of like a person or something. So think about that around this time as well. Carol says the day before the king's coronation here in the UK, he's an eclipse Scorpio too. Oh my goodness, that is interesting. So that'll be a big day for him for sure. And I wonder, I've seen various people who are not super excited about his impending coronation. I'm not a super expert on the British royal family, but I know that doesn't seem to be as popular as some other royal figures. I tend to be of the opinion, and I hope I'm not offending anyone here, because I know that there's a lot of tradition and culture around it. Even though I'm a Scorpio, or even though I'm a Leo rising, I tend to like seeing anyone be a king or a royalty figure kind of rubs me the wrong way. Maybe it's my Aquarius South Node, but I hope that we're moving towards a equality. I wouldn't be super sad if we abolished royalty in general, like on some level. But I know that it is important as far as like some social things for people. So I hope that I'm not being the ignorant American here. Oh yes, Remco says it's time for a stretch. I agree. And thank you, Remco, for the super sticker. I appreciate you. And thank you, Ani, for the super sticker. Ani says, so remote camping to bask under a lunar eclipse is an unwise idea. No crystals, just being in nature, admiring. You know what? If that is what connects you to nature, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, there might be some unexpected things that come up if you're going on a trip. Probably wouldn't be my first choice for going on a trip where there's wild cards happening. But I think that it is, however you find ways to relax and find, peace in your life, I would go for it. Raven says, everything you're saying has been really resonating with my experience of the nodes in my 1st and 7th houses as they move ever closer to my rising degree and natal north node. Oh my goodness, Raven, hang in there. So this will be a big eclipse for you potentially. I hope that things are going well in your relationship life and your expansion of your personal self with the North Node in the 1st and Uranus, maybe giving you a different self-image potentially of what is possible for you and breaking you out of those well-entrenched routines. I guess just be gentle with yourself and with the people in your life around this period of time for sure. Okay, I'm going to do 2 more things here, and then we will do the aforementioned stretch break. Let me get to the end of this decan, and then we will stretch out because we're getting past the hour and a half mark here. So that's our eclipse. When we get to the 6th, the moon's going to be out of bounds on the 6th. So again, this could be emotional. Post-eclipse time we could feel tired, emotional. Our bodies could be just a little bit out of sync. So give yourself some extra recovery time after this. That'll be from the 6th to the 11th. And then on the 7th, right after the eclipse, we've got Venus moving into Cancer. I like Venus in Cancer. I'm a Cancer sun, so I mean, of course I'm going to like it. But this is Venus moving into her own decan and her own face, which is the 2 of Cups energy. So Venus has a special power to be able to create mutually beneficial relationships. So maybe there's, instead of like a huge ending or someone dying or a breakup, maybe there's just a clearing of the air conversation that happens that allows you to have a more balanced and harmonious relationship. So we don't want to catastrophize all of these aspects. It does tend to be somewhat dramatic when we have an eclipse over an angular house. I would be not being honest if I didn't say that there was some really, really tough stuff that we can experience, especially with an angular eclipse or an eclipse that touches a planet in our natal chart. I had this eclipse series last year. I had a lot of loss in my family. I had a lot of my mom, great aunt, and grandfather all passed within a month of each other. So that was a huge, huge change. But I'm still here. I survived. I'm processing that and moving forward with life, and you can do that too. So Venus moving into Cancer is going to help smooth out some of the challenges that Mars has been bringing us in that particular placement. Now Venus is moving into a trine with Saturn instead of a square. So we're just really getting into our feelings and in our emotions and learning what we really need to support ourselves and to feel supported and to support others. How is it balanced? Okay. So this is a great time to find harmony within your personal relationships after maybe a difficult full moon clearing of the air, so to speak. As we get to the 9th, we're going to see the conjunction of the Sun and Uranus. So this is a wild card, right? This is something, I think this is probably a good surprise potentially. It's in a decan that is fairly fortunate. The host of the Sun is in a much happier place. It's able to witness the Sun now. So the grace that we have for one another, the gratitude, the ability to put our plans into material form is much more supported when Venus is in Cancer than when Venus was in Gemini. Okay, so we're overwhelmed with all the possibilities and ideas when Venus is in Gemini, but really then we get to start to really nurture our most important things when Venus is moving into Cancer here. So just pay attention to having your routines shaken up a little bit on May the 9th, but maybe in a nice way. Like this could be just going off somewhere that you don't normally go. Maybe going on a date with your significant other or a new person, going somewhere nice or something like that. That could be some positive manifestation. There will be a Moon Venus opposition, so there may be some conversations about security versus where the best place to manifest would be potentially with the opposition between Cancer 1 and Capricorn 1. So consider that as well. Okay, I'm going to read these comments and I'm going to stretch. So this is the point we got to the end of Taurus 1 or 2, the second decan of Taurus, and I'm going to read through the comments as I stretch my legs. Please feel free to take the opportunity to stretch, get a snack, get some tea, and Michelle says, I feel that. Oh, Rachel. Okay, I'm going back. Rachel says, Black Moon Lilith is currently in Leo. I hear you about monarchies, Spencer. Yeah, I don't know. Just something about it just rubs me the wrong way. And especially with Pluto and Aquarius, we're really just being challenged to see each other as equals. And the whole pomp and circumstance of royalty, I've just never been a huge fan of that kind of thing in general. Not that I don't like a good party or like fancy clothes or beautiful surroundings, but when you're doing that and you continue doing that at the expense of people who are suffering and that don't have anything and having this opulence, I find that off-putting. And I also just find like ceremonial positions where we care a lot more what people do and think just because of what family they were born into. That's my fart noise for that. I just kind of think I think we need to move on from that as a species, and have just maybe a little bit more of a democratic viewpoint of things, because we need to support one another. And I know that, again, a lot of it's just entertainment at this point. But I also will say in the defense of people who are into that kind of thing, I wasn't raised in a culture that had a king. So that wasn't put into my psyche from a young age that was important. I was in fact raised in a country that was like, fuck you, king, we're going to go do our own thing. Like, so again, that might be the American part of things coming out in me. That's maybe just deeply embedded in our collective cultural things. So again, if you're into that kind of thing, more power to you. It doesn't matter to me. I could honestly care less about what any of those folks do. And if it's important to you, pursue it. Michelle saying, I definitely feel ready for changes where the eclipses is hitting my chart, Cap rising. Yeah. It's nice when they're moving into a different house if you've been having angular eclipses or whatnot, although you will start having angular eclipses now, Michelle. So the changes are coming. Raven says, oh yes, huge changes in my identity and lots of work around my relationships and learning how I have been codependent and working towards a more independent sense of self. Good. Raven, you are in alignment with the astrology. You are living your life in alignment with the Tao and what the planets are requiring of you, which is nice. EK Beth says, this is all lining up with my life with synchronicity under the Taurus rising. Taurus rising, I'm like, yep, this is happening. May is, thank you all beings, the last month I'll be living with my ex-husband. I am so ready. Thank you. We'll catch the rest on replay. Well, thank you, Beth, and thank you for the super sticker, friend. And good luck with the transitions that you all are going through, Taurus risings in particular, with your individuality versus your partnerships. I know that's Tauruses are not creatures that super enjoy change, myself included. Cheers. And when Uranus is blowing up our angles, our moons, our suns, our Marses, all of these things, it's like, oh man, just let me relax. Why can't I relax, right? And it's uncomfortable. But change is important, and even the most fixed of us need to embrace change every once in a while, because again, if something isn't bearing fruit, think of it like this. I'm going to give you the most Taurus metaphor ever. I want to show you something. So last week I showed you my bougainvillea. I don't know if I showed you this before, but this is a little weeping cherry. And it had grown a giant branch that extended out to here, and it was just so out of balance. Like, there was so much energy going to this, and I cut that branch back, and it was a little bit painful because it's always tough to cut away the wood, especially if it's fertile. So there may even be things that are really prosperous that we have to cut away because it's not balanced in our life. But look, there's all these new shoots that are coming out. It stimulated new growth and brought a new sense of balance. So think about that the things that you're cutting away may lead to greater balance in your life and greater growth and fertility eventually. This is something you learn as a gardener, is you got to prune every once in a while. So Uranus is helping you to prune your life, Tauruses, and you will be healthier and more vibrant afterwards because of it. Okay. Ani says, that's heavy to revive a dead dream, eclipse power. Yeah. Well, that's part of it too. Like, sometimes when you cut back a tree that has some dead wood on it, it will sprout out some new shoots too. So I've been learning that about things in my yard, as all of the junk trees that I cut away sprout new little things that are hard to get rid of. Ani says, royalty would gain more respect and trust if they disperse their abundance amongst the people they think they own by birthright. Say it again, louder for the people in the back, Ani. Amen. Yeah. And honestly, there are people that can try to consider themselves royalty in this country too, through their financial power, that could use some of that same advice. Bezos, all these guys that are billionaires. I just don't think billionaires should exist. I think that that's just too much hoarding of wealth. I think that there's a certain point of diminishing returns where they have as many yachts as they can, own potentially, while other people are struggling, and it's just really, it's off-putting to me. America, yeah. We're not perfect in this country by any stretch of the imagination, and we're struggling as a community right now with a lot of changes and a lot of conflicts, and I hope that we can, be more collectively supportive of one another as we move forward in this country. Fallon is here. Fallon, lean into the uncomfortable. Be curious. How you doing, Fallon? Haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're doing okay, friend. I hope that your life is going okay right now. So thank you. Welcome. Okay, friends. So we stretched out. We got a drink of water. We got some tea. I'm getting a little hit of this protein shake. We stretched out, cracked our backs a little bit. Got some blood flowing. Get some chi moving. Let's talk Taurus 3. All right. So I'm going to share my screen once again, and we are going to look at the third decan of Taurus and talk about some of the changes that are going to be happening around that period of time. It's interesting. We're seeing some new faces on a weekend when I'm doing this. I think intentionally trying to shake it up a little bit to see if what people could come on a different day. Honestly, what happens with scheduling these lives is oftentimes I'll have either a busier or not as busy week with clients, and if I have a really busy client week, it's sometimes harder to get all the notes done for the lives in time for Friday. So I just in Taurus fashion, I needed to give myself a little bit of space to make sure that I prepared properly and take my time with it instead of force it and then have a lower quality experience. So thanks for your flexibility with the days that we do this too. And I know some of you will be able to make certain days and you won't be able to make others, but we're doing the best we can. Yeah. Michelle's confirming, same, no need for monarchy these days. The thought of them being superior because of their bloodline just seems so archaic. Yes, exactly. I agree. Okay. So Taurus 3, you can see we are looking at a figure, I believe it is reevaluating whether the crops are growing well or not. And you can see that there's some green leaves and then there's some brown leaves and there's no fruit really on the vine. I've done some research with this, especially in this book, The Secrets of the Rider-Waite Tarot, which is a really great book that talks about Pamela Coleman Smith's experience and some of the kind of secret themes that she put into that work. And here, this is a picture of like the potato famines of 1840, I believe, in Ireland. And this is blight. So there's some themes in this decan of a couple things. First of all, it is a decan that is related to forces of nature that are kind of outside of our control. Okay. And thank you, Remco, for putting that link in there. The Decans of Taurus webinar that you're seeing a preview of here is on sale on my website for 20% off right now. So if you want to support my work, that's a great way to learn more about the Decans and to support the work that I do here. And it helps me at the lives too. Like I put a lot of energy and effort into the lives, and I always really am so grateful when people are supporting my work through the Decans webinars and scheduling readings and donations, all of that. It's all good, and thank you so much. So Taurus 3, forces of nature. And here the potato famine is a force of nature that maybe made the result of their planting not as fortunate as they were hoping for, not as abundant. And you can think of this decan as a place where we will be dealing with mistakes. I think that's one of the biggest parts of this decan is where we through maybe haste or through doing something rashly. We may have, you know, we may have changed, we may have not done something as thoroughly as we had hoped, and we have to go back, repent, I guess is the word that comes up a lot in this decan, and make some changes. So some of the themes that we talk about with this, acts of nature are common in this that are outside of our control: floods, droughts, pestilence, natural disasters, humility before nature, assessing our efforts and remediating mistakes. Okay, remediation is a really important part of this decan. Netzach and Asya is the Kabbalistic tree of life sephira, and so that's enduring. Netzach is like an endurance kind of quality, even though it's Venus. Netzach has been one that has been a little bit confusing for me in the studies. Endurance, as far as a Venusian quality, is interesting to me and worth further exploration. But the part of the material hardship part of this decan of Taurus is that it's ruled by Saturn. So we have a Mercury decan in Taurus 1, where we're planning for our material future. We have the lunar decan in Taurus 2, where we're manifesting it. We're putting it into a body. We're making it real. We're being consistent. We're going through phases. And then in the third decan, we have a Saturn decan where we're material processes are either coming to an end. We're dealing with corruption, or with rot is a signification of Saturn. Drought, like something where mold is kind of growing on something. That feels like the energy of this decan on some level. So we have a spirit or a daimon associated with Taurus 3, which is called the Litai. We had the Horai in the second decan of Taurus, which are the seasons. The Charities were the Decanic daimonic forces in the first decan. So Charities, Horai, Litai. And Litai were these old women, Saturn, very Saturn, that are hobbling after 8. And 8 was like a demon or something like that would come down and like step on the heads of humanity. And 8 translates to ruin or like rashness. So sometimes or folly, I guess. So if we rush through things, it's easy to make mistakes. So the Litai are giving us the opportunity to surrender to a higher power, to humble ourselves, and to say, you know what, maybe this didn't work. We need to reevaluate and make some changes. So faith is a big part of this decan as well, faith in the process. So questions you could ask yourself: what results and consequences have your efforts produced? In this case, in this card, the efforts weren't ideal. How much work is left and how much further is there to go? You can see the figure in this card is kind of leaning on his hoe and taking a break and saying, oh man, I've got a lot of work to do to heal this blight. Okay. Ask yourself what went wrong and what did you learn from your mistakes? Like, again, it's not the end of the world if the process that you're going through didn't go exactly how you planned. This is just life. Sometimes you just have to shift. Sometimes there's things that are out of your control. This is sort of the humanity versus nature philosophical question that we have. Nature will humble you 100%. Sometimes you have the greatest plan in the world, but if a storm comes along and does something that can be really destabilizing, and you have to deal with it. I had a nice conversation with someone that I work with. It talked about like a tornado coming and just blowing away a place where they were doing some research, and they had big plans around it, and it was very frustrating, but it shifted them in a different direction. So sometimes nature it's really powerful. And we're going to be dealing with this probably even more intensely as Uranus in particular moves into this decan very shortly. Okay, this is going to be happening in June. Uranus is going to be heading into Taurus 3. And I think that the natural weather stuff is going to be something to keep an eye on. Now, again, that doesn't mean you shouldn't live your life. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go have fun. It just means that it's probably important to be prepared more so for having a disruption to your life that's based on nature. One example: the power has gone out in our in our home area a lot more in the last few years than it had in all the times that we lived here previously. There's a lot of brownouts in the summer due to excessive heat and people running the air conditioners all the time. There's been a lot of power outages because of excessive snow and ice. And you saw on this channel that I was without power for an entire week. So if you know that those types of things are happening, like being prepared by like figuring out if you can have a backup power supply, or having a plan if you were to have a natural disaster or something like that, those things are important, just to be prepared without getting overly frozen with fear. I think that's important. How can you be prepared but not like so paranoid about something coming down the pike that you just can't live your life anymore? That's where balance comes in. Okay. You could ask yourself, did you rush something? Can it be redone correctly? Can you protect what you've cultivated from blight? There we bring in the card energy there, right? If you've worked really hard in your garden, eventually there will be bugs that try to eat the leaves. There will be mold that tries to grow if you don't constantly monitor it. So paying attention and being in the moment instead of neglecting something could be part of this energy as well. And then again, where do you need to surrender to a higher power? Austin Coppock calls this deck a string of prayer beads. So there is the power of prayer to be able to help is important. And that's really what the Litai offered, was repentant prayer after 8 had come and caused ruin and folly. Okay, so if you have a humble perspective, you can fix things, And sometimes the humility comes just from asking for help. Like if you've gotten too either selfish or self-absorbed, and you need your community in a time of crisis, it takes humility to ask for help. I know that this is something we were thinking about is, man, we really need to make sure we're continuing to connect with people in our neighborhood and things of that nature, because there could be additional crises that happens, and you can't just go off and isolate yourself and expect to continue to be successful. Okay, so that's Taurus 3. And some of the other things that make it a challenging decan is it does have a few very difficult fixed stars. One being Capulus, which is the sword of Perseus, so like rashness. That's the 8 part, I think, and on some level. And then Algol is at 26 degrees of Taurus. Capulus is at 24 degrees. And Algol is the blinking eye of Medusa, which is, the Chinese call it piled up corpses. So you take from that what you will. It is a very dangerous fixed star that can lead to some really challenging events. It can also represent latent feminine empowerment. So there might be something around that gets triggered around Algol placements as well. Doesn't mean that you're going to have a negative experience if you have a planet on Algol. You just have to learn to direct that energy in the right direction, the right space. But be careful when planets are moving on Algol of losing your head. If you look at that myth, you want to be able to own that power rather than have it be just a power that is, uncontrollable, I guess I would say. You want to be the master of it rather than having it master you. But that again takes self-awareness and humility. Algol can be very protective too. Like that's one of the other things that astrological magicians use that fixed star for. You just have to be careful about it because you don't want to turn it on yourself. It can be used to protect you in difficult situations. Ani, I'm reading your comment. I never noticed that there was no fruit on the 7 of Pentacles. The lack of health and abundance of this harvest, this card represents malnourished and diseased, puts a new perspective on the card. Yeah. And it really is part of that decan too, like doesn't mean that you can't create positive outcomes in this decan. It just means that oftentimes it takes maintenance. I think that there's a maintenance quality to this decan too. It's like you've planted the seeds, you've watered it, you have these expectations. Now you have to kind of wait, right? You have to wait, you have to maintain it. It hasn't fruited yet. Maybe there's some things that haven't worked out as well as you hoped, but that doesn't mean the entire plant is dead yet, right? You might just have to keep working and weeding the garden. Weeding is part of this process too. There's some things that maybe don't belong in the garden at this point. Tarya T says, my natal nodes are in the same position in Aries Libra axis as they are moving next. Cancer rising stellium and Aquarius, also the sun. So welcome Pluto. Change is the name of the game. Yeah, Tarya, you're going to be feeling these Aries and Libra eclipses, and you probably already have been getting some downloads as far as what the next chapter is in your 10th house in particular, like with the way that you put yourself out in the world. So I wish you luck with that, friend. Okay, so that is Taurus 3. And again, Decans of Taurus webinar, 2.5 to 3 hours for each of these webinars, specifically focused on all of the planets, the stories, the tarot, the fixed stars. I go into depth with all of that. We have a nice discussion at the end of each of them with the people that attended live. You get the digital decking flashcards, audio and video to download. You can find that on my website, 20% off until the end of Taurus season, which is until 5/21. So let me take one more stretch here. Stretching is important. I think as we get older, we just got to keep moving a little bit. And one of the things I've been working on is making sure that I'm moving my body in ways that will lubricate my joints. Sometimes I'll do this little shake, like feel like a peacock or something, where you just shake your tail feathers. Sometimes that can get your joints loosened up. I've been really working on my posture too. I don't know if you heard that crack, but I've been trying to sit up straighter because doing a lot of work at the computer, it can slump your shoulders. And I already have some shoulder challenges from some sports injuries. I was a baseball player, played baseball, hockey, and basketball, and soccer. Played all of those sports in high school. I was mostly a hockey and a baseball player. And I was the type of baseball player that tried to be very heroic at various times and sacrifice my body by diving for fly balls. And I dislocated my shoulder a number of times doing that. And I continued that energy into adult softball league. An adult softball, I don't know if any of you have ever played this game, but adult softball, everybody hits the ball like a million times. And if they stick you in left field, you're just running everywhere, diving for every ball, because just you're going to get a lot of action that you might not normally get, just because people can just hit the ball pretty far in those. And I screwed my shoulder up doing that a couple times too. So if you hear all the pops and crackles, there it is. Okay, so let's go look at the chart. Let's go look at the chart now. Let's go look at the chart now. Let's go look at the chart now and look at the aspects. That's to the tune of Let's All Go to the Movies that you see in the intermissions. So we're looking now at the time, Taurus 3. Oh my goodness, we're going to be here forever, aren't we? I'll try to go a little quicker. The slow burn of Spencer Michaud astrology. I won't tell you what Austin told me the secret superpower of the moon in Taurus was. It wasn't a burn, though. He said it was the slow something, which was a very interesting experience. And I will remember that conversation for a long time. Very fortunate to spend some time with some really amazing astrologers at the United Astrology Conference in 2018. And just really love seeing all the different directions people have gone with their lives and careers and books. And it was a really special moment. And hope to be able to do that again someday. So here we're looking at May the 10th through May 21st. Okay, so roughly a decan will give us about a 10 to 11 degree period of time. Decanoi. There is the number 10 infused in that word. So the second decan of Taurus, friends. This just on the whole, we're going to see some funkadoodleness with Jupiter and Pluto. And I'll get to that in a second, but we're going to start heading into the tense, I think the tense part of the month, where we're getting into a fixed standoff between some of these planets. Yeah, Ani says, let's all go to the lobby. Yeah. There's your music break, Remco, if you're listening after the fact. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and have ourselves a snack. I wish I could remember all the words to Ghosts again, because I'd be jamming on that right now. I can't. My brain is just not functioning well today, even though I listened to that song like 8 times yesterday in a row. So Taurus 3, excuse me. We start off, you can see that we're still kind of processing the eclipse. We're starting off Taurus 3 with like the moon in Capricorn here, making a trine to the sun, but which is nice. So maybe we're thinking about how we're going to move forward with the resources that we have and how we're going to build our next projects and things like that. Oh, okay. Yeah, take care, Remco. Take care, friend. Good to see you. But the first kind of thing that we're going to be looking at aspectually is May the 12th. There's a lot going on May the 12th. There's a number of aspects that are perfecting on that day. So all of these things, we will feel the lead up to them, but here's when they're going to be coming exact. So this is a Friday, May the 12th, depending on your location. Here we have Mercury retrograde making a sextile to Saturn. And I'll just circle them all here, and then we'll see if we can contextualize them. Then we have also the moon, the last quarter moon, the moon sun square right here. Okay. And finally, Venus is going to be making a sextile to Mercury. So this is like all these planets are going to be interacting simultaneously. And this is one thing I'm really liking about Sophie Strand's book and her approach to myth and culture as mycelial networks, right? Is that we can't just isolate just one of these aspects. If they're happening at the same time like this, we need to look at them kind of together. And yes, we need to look at the different pieces, but finding the whole is, I think, more important. So the big picture thing on this day, May the 12th, is the last quarter moon. So this could be a day of reevaluation. This could be a day, especially with the sun in the third decan of Taurus, where you're like, something's not working. I need to redo this. The third decan of Aquarius, we have the 7 of Swords energy. Okay. So here's the 7 of Swords, where someone is just kind of leaving an encampment, sneaking away with 5 swords while leaving 2 behind. So if we think about the square energy between those 2 cards in particular, the 7 of Pentacles and the 7 of Swords, maybe there's something in your life where you're like, you know what, this isn't working. I just have to let go. I'm going to quit, and I'm going to take the wisdom that I learned, and it's finally just time to like go off into the unknown and the frontier. And this could be the moment where you had a revelation of what needed to be reduced and what needed to be, composted around the eclipse. And now this is the moment of finally like moving on. Or, this is the moment where you could be trying to take a more objective perspective in your life that could lead to the ability to fix what has been fallen into disrepair. Okay, so the challenge in this last quarter moon phase will be to how can you have a healthy long-term perspective versus dealing with the challenges that you have in the moment as well. Okay. In that context, we have this kind of like, I guess triangle. I don't know what this would be called in modern astrology. I don't really know those shapes very well that they speak towards. But we have Mercury making this kind of triangle aspect via sextile with Venus and Saturn. So both of those planets are going to be having conversations with Mercury, or Mercury will be having conversations with them. Mercury will be retrograding back into the first decan of Taurus, getting ready to station direct in a few days on the 14th. So this is another big feature of our third decan Taurus energy, is the Mercury stationing direct again. So we may have to make new plans, right? We started making plans as Mercury is moving through the first decan of Taurus. As Mercury retrograded and we figured out maybe we didn't have the resources we thought we did, now we have to make a new plan. Or maybe we wasted some resources or something like that. With the sextile to Saturn, Saturn is going to be asking us, are the plans that we're making in service of our highest, most important, meaningful dreams? And if they aren't, get rid of them. The conversation that Mercury is having with Venus is, are we utilizing our resources in service of creating mutually beneficial relationships? So there's a harmonious conversation with those two planets. And then eventually, we are also seeing on the 13th, Venus having that conversation exactly with Saturn, which says, how can we build this dream together? Because we can build a dream together, right? Jefferson Starship. Na, 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 nothing's gonna stop us now. If this world runs out of lovers, we'll still have each other. Nothing's gonna stop us. Nothing's gonna stop us now, right? Say what you will about that band. They're kind of cheesy in the 80s, but catchy tunes, I guess. Tanya always makes fun of me because I don't always remember the lyrics to things correctly. Blame my retrograde Mercury, maybe. But I'm good at making up lyrics to songs because I couldn't always remember the lyrics, which really helped out when, writing songs, but not so great for just covering something faithfully. Okay, so this is an important day for, having conversations about planning, making sure it fits in with the dream, and making sure that it's a mutually beneficial relationship for everyone. And sometimes that's going to take humility, acknowledging the mistakes that we've made, and being willing to move on from some things that just weren't working, okay? So that's the 12th. And Blues Clues, yeah. Will be interesting to see how this manifests. Okay, so we get to the 13th is when the Venus-Saturn aspect perfects. And some of these conversations that you're having about plans of how to delegate your resources or how to, budget and things like that, which is a very Taurus, Mercury and Taurus one, it might lead to some emotional conversations. I think that oftentimes we run up against our limits when Venus and Saturn are coming together, the limits that we have in a relationship. And also, since this is a trine, though, this could be a positive conversation about limits, boundaries. It's of course in two signs that traditionally have difficulties with boundaries. And you can see the moon's going to be activating Saturn as well. So this also might be a time where we're just like, we've got some important conversations to have, but we would rather just go off into a land of enchantment. I think on some level, you might just be feeling like, I'm over it. I just want to get along. I'm tired of fighting. Let's just find a way to work within the limits that we both have in our lives or something of that nature. All right. So what is your shared vision is something to ask yourself with Venus and Saturn trining in these two particular decans. How can you find a vision that includes both of you rather than is it cross purposes? So that will, hopefully that fruitful conversation will lead to the 14th and the 15th where Mercury is stationing direct. So Mercury stations direct on the 14th, which is a Sunday, and it stations direct at 5 degrees of Taurus, so that your plans get to move forward again. You get to start to look to both the Taurus house for where the fruiting body of this energy may be happening. I've been kicking around mushroom metaphors with the chart. You think of the planet in the house as the mushroom, the fruiting body of the mushroom, but it is being fed energy from both its host, okay? Like in this case, Venus is feeding energy like a mycelial network to the mushroom that's fruiting in Taurus. And also Mercury is feeding its energy to the Libra area of your chart, okay, even though there's no mushroom there at the moment. And it's feeding energy to, oh no, geez. Sorry, Mercury's trying to get me again. Mercury is the ruler of both Virgo and Gemini. Oh man. So from this Venusian place, Mercury is probably going to have a more direct line of conversation with the Virgo topic in your life rather than the Gemini area of your life. It still will have an influence on that, but you're probably going to be seeing things move forward both in the Taurus area of your life and the Virgo area of your life, more importantly. Okay, so like for example, in this Leo rising chart, perhaps there is some professional conversation or plan that helps support your financial picture because Virgo is on the second house cusp. Whereas there also might be something that is affecting a group that you're a part of, or some that could also be intertwined with your finances, but it's going to have less influence on that group experience and more influence on your second house. So think about that. And do that with your own chart. Where is the manifestation in Taurus leading to is acting as the mycelium for that other particular area of your chart, okay? Planets act both as mushrooms and as mycelium. I think that's what is really interesting about thinking about it this way. They are both visible manifestations and also providing resources for other topics. And that's why we have these nice interconnected, interdimensional, interdependent relationships in the chart. Okay, so that's the 14th. The 15th that I have up here, we have a trine between Mars in Cancer and Neptune. Mars is still in a challenging position in Cancer. It's in its fall traditionally. So there still might be challenges where we may be aware of places where we benefit, where other people suffer. Questions of abundance versus scarcity. Maybe even being separated from something luxurious that we want. This is another manifestation of the third decan of Cancer is luxurious tastes. So if you have Mars there, you might pursue luxury, and you might be a little bit blinded by your vision with the trine to Neptune. You might not be realistic about, your budget or something like that. But then Mercury moving forward could say, okay, well, here's a new plan. Just be careful that you're not overdoing it with the rose-colored glasses type of thing. I often find that contacts with Neptune tend to take me outside of my body as well through a sense of fatigue. So we both have Mars in a place that it's not super comfortable and making contact in Neptune, even though it's a trine. We may be just feeling really tired as Mercury is moving forward, and we've got all these plans and that we've got to make, and our brains might be a little bit tired. So some of the best things that you might be able to do with this Mars-Neptune energy is just relax a little bit. Maybe you don't have to necessarily do anything important. Just having the plan and writing down things to get it out of your head is enough. And that might give you the space to be able to pursue some of those more transcendent energy that Mars and Neptune may be asking for. Dissolving boundaries, right? All right. When we get to the 16th, 16th is a really interesting day. So the 16th and the 17th is going to be very active in this month, because on the 16th, if we go forward, a few more hours. Let's just go forward together. Here you see Jupiter is moving into Taurus. Big shift, which changes a lot of relationships in the chart. It shifts the host that Jupiter is working with for the better in this case. Jupiter had been working with a fallen Mars for much of its time in Aries, which means that the clay or the mycelium that it was working with was not in the best shape. It had some challenges around it. Now, Jupiter is going to be drawing upon the energy of Venus in Cancer, which is a much more comfortable place for Venus. Venus will still be in its own face for a little bit of time here, but we're going to see Venus moving through Cancer, through at least the very beginning phases of Jupiter in Taurus. So this could be very expansive for the plans that you're making. You might be able to start seeing the manifestation of your Taurian dreams. May be really good for creating abundance in your life. It may also require you to work together with a partner or with a group of people that you care about and create mutually beneficial relationships with them. Mars is going to leave Cancer shortly after this and begin to square Jupiter, but then Mars will not be in a place that it's as uncomfortable in, though, which I think is an improvement. And also, once Mars moves into Leo, Jupiter will be in the overcoming square to it, trying to provide help from that area of our life. Okay. So, sextile relationship to Venus, I mean, that's pretty positive, having a sextile relationship to its host in a similar element, water and earth there. So the fields are ripe for planting around this period of time. There's an abundance of resources, plans. It's really important to you create honor and merit through wise material planning once Jupiter moves into Taurus. Now, keep in mind, Jupiter is going to retrograde later on in the summer at the same degree that Mercury retrograded at this month, 15 degrees of Taurus. So any of the things that came up for reevaluation during the Mercury retrograde period, you may start to see from a slightly different angle to be reevaluated when Jupiter moves forward. So just keep that in mind as Jupiter moves into Taurus, is take your time, try to avoid rushing the process, because then you might have to deal with some of the Taurus 3 repercussions, right? You might find that some of the resources that you are planning for may not be as abundant or available as you would hope. So just be vigilant with that, I would say. I'm reminding myself of this. I guess one of the things I'm looking at with this is that I have a vision that I've literally made a Photoshop document around of my garden, right? My pollinator habitat, my 5-star nature habitat. And there's 3 or 4 completely different areas of the yard that I would like to redo. I might not be able to do all of them in one season, right? There's a lot of digging of grass, turning over of soil, planting, mulching, getting rid of things, preparing things, choices to be made. And I may have to scale it back a little bit because it might be a multi-year process, not just, you might not have the Martha Stewart garden, overnight. And I know that's probably going to be part of my process as I go through that, especially with both of these planets retrograding on my natal moon in Taurus. So try to maybe scale back your vision slightly, because there will be a reevaluation process once it moves into Taurus. But overall, I think that it's a pretty positive place for Jupiter, and I'm excited about it. If you have an angular Taurus house, you probably are going to feel an expansion of your resources coming. And this is true for Taurus risings, Leo risings, Scorpio risings, and Aquarius risings. You're going to feel this most intensely with Jupiter on an angle. I'm pretty excited about it as a Leo rising, having Jupiter move into my 10th house. So maybe you'll see some new things on the horizon with Spencer Michaud astrology or Spencer Michaud music. Who knows? We'll see. So the next day, and pretty much immediately we'll start feeling this, but the 17th, Jupiter is going to come into a whole sign square with Pluto. So let's put that back on the angle there, just for shits and giggles. So one of the things to keep in mind as we move into Jupiter and Taurus season is there's going to be some other parts of your life pulling you in a different direction. Pluto is in Aquarius, asking us to reevaluate collective issues, technology issues, things like that. The big picture versus the immediate, sensory gratification might be part of the challenge with Jupiter and Pluto squaring one another. Pluto, I've also read that Pluto tends to blow things. It blows things out of proportion. It makes small things very big, and sometimes it can make big things very small. This was something that I read about. I believe Alan White talked about this, who was a contemporary of Robert Schmidt from Project Hindsight. They talk about like creating a nuclear bomb from an atom, or the atom bomb. Like that's creating something very big from something very small. And then the opposite was true, and I can't remember the example he gave on that, but just be careful that your ambitions, your material ambitions, don't get too blown out of proportion around this period of time. I know that this is a tendency I have sometimes, where I have a vision and then I want it to get big really quickly, and I've learned that I have to pace myself, or I can really, it's easy for me to make mistakes if I don't slow down a little bit. Okay, so that's the square with Jupiter and Pluto. If you want to look at the tarot cards that are associated with this, take a look at the 5 of Pentacles and the 5 of Swords. So to avoid the defeat in the 5 of Swords that we see, you may have to have some material restraint so that you don't end up like the 5 of Pentacles, people destitute outside of the church with an injury and illness, or like falling on hard times. So just plan very well on this period of time. Okay. The other thing that I wrote down in my notes that I think is kind of a fascinating way of thinking about this, I wrote excessive material ambitions, delusions of grandeur, desire to expand our resources, meeting a social corruption potentially. Zeus quarreling with Hades, right? Zeus being Jupiter and Hades being Pluto. They were actually brothers, and they were assigned different territories. Zeus, the sky; Hades, underneath the earth, the land of the dead. So there might be just this territorial issue coming up as well, or sibling rivalry even on some level. And I find this being like a nature versus technology energy as well. People could start to get fed up with the AI stuff, or AI maybe starts to expand in a way that becomes tense. I do think we will get to that inflection point at some point in the very near future. People are like, oh, a decade from now, AI is going to be able to do all this. I don't know, friends. At the rate that it's going, AI is going to be really, really powerful in like months, not years. So we may start to see some of the challenges around that as Jupiter hits Pluto and all of the things that brings. Okay. So on the 18th, let's go forward on the 18th. So the 18th, we have a sextile between the Sun and Neptune, okay, which could bring us a sense of purpose and vision, especially when we're reviewing the effectiveness of our prior material processes. I'm just relating to the Sun in Taurus here, and we're kind of, as we see the Jupiter-Pluto square, keep in mind the Sun is exactly on Algol. So this is another thing that's pointing to some intensity around the 16th through the 18th in particular. Okay, so this is something where we could see just people maybe freaking out a little bit because of some challenges that are social, that are affecting our material resources, and people might be losing their heads. I guess I would encourage you to, instead of lashing out or doing something abrupt, or rash, slow down, determine if there's anything that you can do to remedy maybe a mistake that was made in the past or something of that nature, and then get in touch with your own feminine power on some level, right? With the Algol and Medusa energy of how can you become a great creator through learning the act of receiving as well, and opening yourself up to a higher power or divine guidance or the goddess, okay? Because nature can remedy all sorts of things. Yes, nature can create blights and challenges, but it is also so restorative. That's something that can bring balance to this fear that we have of these nature challenges. If we only would just let nature do what it does. Nature wants to create homeostasis, equilibrium, and balance. I really do believe that. This planet that we live on is a perfect organism if we would just leave it alone, or give it some time to breathe instead of just exploiting it into infinity all the time, constantly. I've seen it in my own yard. Like I've seen like a place that it was overgrown or whatever, and then just the soil became remediated just over time. Sometimes just time is the greatest remediation. So that's where our patience comes in. Ani says, just be glad you're not digging up hard earth in the desert. Oh no, it's hard labor. Landscaping instead of gardening. Good luck on reinventing your yard. Yeah, thanks, Ani. And I know there's different challenges in different, geographic locations for sure. In the Midwest, we just have a lot of, the weather is somewhat unpredictable. The seasons are changing quite a bit in the last few years about how long the winter lasts. And we had 80 degrees last week, and now it's like it was 40 degrees a few days ago. It's just kind of a little chaotic on some level. But yes, I think that patience is super important. And again, staying connected with what your ultimate purpose is really important. And to me, the ultimate purpose of changing my landscaping is to provide a little oasis for the bees, the butterflies, the animals. And when I keep that in the back of my mind, that's what drives me. But also, I don't have to create all of that overnight. And you don't either. Okay, so that was the sextile between the Sun and Neptune, and the Algol placement that was active at the Jupiter-Pluto square. We look at the 19th, May 19th, we have a sextile between Mercury and Saturn early in the day. Okay, and this is now a direct Mercury sextile. This is like the second sextile that we've seen between these two planets. We had the retrograde sextile on the 12th, and now we have it direct. So some of the issues that came up on the 12th, the conversations, you might be able to revisit in a way that will actually allow you to move forward on the 19th. The other thing that's happening on the 19th is we have a new moon. So happy new moon that we're seeing here. So let's look at that. Okay. So here's our new moon, 28 degrees of Taurus. The moon will also be out of bounds on this day. Let's see if it's out of bounds during this actual, not quite on the new moon. Venus is out of bounds still, but the moon is not. It will be moving out of bounds shortly after the new moon perfects. This is another thing to keep in mind with Jupiter and the new moon and Uranus and Mercury all in Taurus, is that its host, Venus, is way off in left field. like your taste may be really, expansive, unorthodox. You may be trying to do too many Venusian things that are too much because there's no limitations. Like I've got like 40 plant starts coming, and I got to find places for them. It feels kind of like a Venus out of bounds type of thing. So just pace yourself. And this new moon, again, could be the beginning of reevaluating what has worked so far and what hasn't. And again, the host is going to be an out of bounds Venus at 12 degrees of Cancer, where we have a special ability to create harmony within a group setting, like a family, and also in a sacred, safe space. The second decan of Cancer is all about sacred, safe spaces. The walled garden, Austin Coppock calls it, right? Where we see in the Three of Cups card a celebration of a meeting of the minds, a community coming together to do good work. We also have to protect what we are trying to nurture into fruition. So this could be a great time to get in alignment with what are you trying to grow? What challenges is it facing? What things have worked and what haven't? Again, when you're starting a new project, you're going to make mistakes. It's totally okay and part of the learning process to make a mistake through just not knowing how to do it. When you're done doing something for the first time, you don't have a lot of experience with it. And you can prepare as much as you want, but oftentimes there will be factors that you just could not have prepared for that will require readjustments. So that's part of this new moon, is the beginning of like a readjustment phase, maybe based on just not having enough knowledge the first time around. The good news is this new moon is sextile Mars, so it's a positive relationship with Mars. It is sextile Neptune, so it might be in alignment with our bigger vision. And it will be, even though it is square by whole sign, it will be pretty close to a trine to Pluto via aspect relationship. So, we need to go deep in this one. We need to unearth any flaws in the system and be able to move forward. Because again, even if you have like an insect or something that's damaging a crop, you can still salvage a lot of that crop or that plant or something by cutting away the dead wood and trying something new. Or if like you over fertilize something or something like that, you can change the way that you're taking care of something, and that can lead to a better manifestation. Ani says, stick to the plan, move a little earth every day. Yes, exactly. Pace yourself. But pacing yourself doesn't mean just stopping. It means, like you said, Ani, just showing up each day and doing a little bit of work here and there. Like, this is one of the problems I've been having lately, is that with a lot of my astrology work and with Tanya working a full-time job as well, we save a lot of our gardening to the weekend, and trying to get it all in like 1 or 2 days sometimes feels overwhelming. And we're trying to create a new habit of saving some energy for the end of the day to be able to go out and do a little bit. But it's very difficult because we both have gotten into patterns where we will work really hard during the day and then just be exhausted at the end of it, and just kind of like melt into the couch after a walk. So shifting your routines to be able to be consistent, I think, could be part of this too. Okay, we're not done with the Sun in Taurus 3 yet, friends. We've got one more big thing going on here. On the 20th, okay, here's the 20th. This is a peak moment in the month, and we're having some tension that's going to be happening here. We have 3 planets that are standing off, squaring off with one another. Jupiter, this is like I don't know, have you ever seen that what they call like where they're holding guns at one another? Like, I think it's called they call it a Mexican standoff in movies or something like that, where you got like one gun pointing at you and the gun pointing at another person. Like, that's what these planets are kind of having this conversation with one another. Mars Pluto is challenging. There's no sugarcoating this aspect. It is one of the ones that a lot of astrologers are kind of like, their eyes perk up when they see this in a natal chart, or when they see it in a transit and it's affecting someone personally. Again, Pluto being a planet of blowing things out of proportion, but also revealing corruption, underhanded, underground things that we're experiencing. When we have a Mars Pluto aspect, it's it's volcanic, right? There's something could be erupting from under the ground, maybe literally even in this case, like a volcano or something like that, or like a, I don't know, some kind of natural force. Um, but when we look at Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius, how do we break these two things down? Well, let's talk about Mars moving into Leo. I mean, Mars is moving in the house of the sun. The sun is at the anaretic degree of Taurus, the last degree of like, oh boy, of Taurus here in a decan that's associated with nasty weather. I mean, I think this could most definitely be something where we see some extreme weather patterns somewhere around May 20th. I hope not, for everyone's sake. I hope everyone is able to be safe. But if you live in an area where you have challenging weather around this period of time, I think it's important to probably at least be prepared for that possibility. And the sun is going to move into Gemini shortly after, so it's not a permanent state. But that is the host of the Mars in this case. Mars also in the first decan of Leo is related to that Five of Wands energy, which many authors describe as a competitive, vying for the spotlight type of experience. So Mars is saying, okay, you're going to have to respond to pressure. It's a Saturn decan in a solar sign, and it's Mars. So there's like this heat that's being generated. You're like having to respond to some kind of challenge. And it might be a mock battle, as sometimes it's described in that card. You see these figures kind of like trying to figure out maybe even how to build something on some level, and they're all just going in a different direction. So they have competing interests. So you may have to figure out at this point, how are you going to utilize your competitive nature and balance it out with the need for cooperation. Also, are you going to need to prepare material supplies or something of that? I could see, I'm just, some vision popped into my head of like, let's say that there's like a crazy tornado or something that happens, or an earthquake, and I could see people competing for like resources, like standing in line for water or gas or something of that nature, where people get really aroused about with their scarcity mindset around a crisis, and they're trying to get theirs, where when what would really behoove the situation would be them cooperating with one another. I'm thinking back to like when COVID first hit and everyone went out and emptied the shelves of toilet paper. At the end of the day, like leaving enough for everyone probably would have been the best move, instead of like having an entire attic full of toilet paper. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so just be very careful around this period of time of pursuing a selfish interest at the expense of your community, due to maybe some fear around resources. And if you're a fixed rising, just take a bath that day or something. Like, just do something to relax. Walk in the woods. Like, be careful if you're in the woods. Don't, like, if you face a bear or something, just move slowly. I don't know, just imagining all these crazy things happening. But yeah, a bit of tension. The good news, in my opinion, with this T-square is, if, let's say we just look at this from a Hellenistic perspective, Jupiter is in the overcoming position to Mars. So any of that martial energy that's happening, Jupiter is really going to be, helping through our ability to understand what our physical resources are and how we should best utilize them. Because Jupiter is going to be coming very close to the North Node in a certain time as well. So that planning energy, your resources might be expanding. And again, I want you to really look at in this case now that Jupiter is in Taurus, Jupiter has a direct line of communication to the Pisces area of your life. It now is in aversion to the Sagittarius area of your chart. So that Jupiter Cazimi probably was very good news for the Sagittarius topic. Okay. But now Jupiter moving through Taurus is going to provide a lot more help to the Pisces house and topic in your life. And there's a more harmonious relationship between Jupiter and Saturn as well, which is pretty important because Jupiter and Saturn, have been in aversion to one another, just kind of working at cross purposes. And now on some level, they might be able to start working together in harmony with one another, like making the vision real by being able to direct our resources in a healthy way. Okay, so that's the last decan of Taurus 3, the sun being in the decan of Taurus 3 aspect. So I'm going to stop my share for a minute. How's everybody doing? I think there's still a few of you here. We'll get to Gemini after another little stretch break, and we'll finish off the show. Hope you're all having a nice Saturday afternoon. If you could do me a huge favor while we're taking our break, if you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Please sign up for my Spencer Michaud astrology newsletter. I always like communicating with all of you. Helps you understand when we're going to go live again and when we are going to have new classes, new offerings, all of that, sales, all those things. Ooh, got to get that blood sugar up. Got to stretch my hips out more. I wonder if there's a good hip stretch I can do very quickly while we are stretching. That's always the thing that I find challenging doing these marathon live streams is hip mobility. I want to take this opportunity to go down a short diversion of something ridiculous that I watched with my partner not too long ago that I would highly recommend when I'm thinking of hips. It's a movie from the mid-'80s, I believe 1985. It's called Perfect, and it stars a young John Travolta and a young Jamie Lee Curtis, where John Travolta is a dashing young reporter for Rolling Stone, and Jamie Lee Curtis is a beautiful, Pilates instructor, like something like that. There's all sorts of ridiculousness that ensues, and you've seen the meme and the videos where like John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis are locking eyes, and John Travolta's, I've got like the Elvis Presley camera angle here, so you can't see my hips gyrating, but he's looking very like intense and like he's like hip thrusting, and they're sharing a moment, and he's like, oh my god, I can't believe my hips actually do this. I feel like that's my hip exercises as I'm stretching out here. You'll get that reference from the movie Perfect with Jamie Lee Curtis and John Travolta. So there you go, stretching the hips and story time. Okay, let's buckle in for the last segment here. Ani says, I'm traveling 5:20 on the road to Norwalk. Oh my goodness. Thanks for the heads up. May need to reroute or adapt quickly to make it in one piece. Today has been a blessing to help plan my journey. Oh, that's interesting for Norwalk, isn't it? Having those that big T square right during that event. I'm I know not everybody has to be on the same wavelength as me, and I know I may be on some weird tip at this point, but just the getting together in large groups, I'm still a little freaked out about. And then if you all can go do that safely, tell me how it works out. And because I do miss friends. I do miss my astro friends, and Norwalk looks like just an awesome experience. So I hope you have fun, Ani. Just be careful and, protect yourself as well as you can. Especially, in those crowded spaces. Maybe I'll sign up for the online Norwalk. I haven't done that yet. I think I missed all the discounts, but if you can convince me to hang out with you all on online Norwalk, I might be convinced to show up and hang out. Okay. Ani says, I rarely take a full gas can, but will travel this time. Wish I could call on, but oh, you're car camping. Oh my goodness. Look at all these Norwalk folks. You guys are going to have such a good time. I'm going to have a lot of friends that are going to Norwalk, and I'm probably going to be pretty jealous of all of your experiences. But so it goes. Have fun. Tell me all about it. And make new friends. Some of those friends that you make there are going to be lifelong. I still have conversations with people I met at UAC. That was my big conference experience. And I met some friends at the Great Lakes Astrology Conference that I helped kind of, I helped advertise and promote for a few years. And but Norwalk is a special one. I think that it's a really, there's a lot of great promotion of diversity out there and inclusion. The spirit of inclusion, I think, is really important with that particular conference. And yeah, I hope to see the Pacific Northwest one of these days as well. I've never been there. I've never been to the West Coast, so we'll see. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you a little look into the decans of Gemini. So this one you can purchase at the store still. It's not on sale at the moment, but it probably will be in about a month. So we are looking at the decans of Gemini here, and this is the first decan of Gemini that we are experiencing or going to be experiencing from May the 21st through June the 6th. So that's when the sun is changing signs. The host is now Mercury, and we are starting off with the host in aversion to the sun. Whereas we had a line of communication between the sun and its host Venus when the sun was in Taurus, now we're in the aversion phase. I think eventually Mercury and the sun are going to meet up in Gemini. I believe, I'll have to look at that for sure. Not as a Kazemi, but I think they will be co-present with one another at some point. But again, mercurial times. Now we're looking at the 8 of Swords here in our Gemini 1 slide in the Decans of Gemini webinar. And we have a spirit called Tethys. Tethys, I call this decan, my name for it was Rivers of Choice, because Tethys was like the goddess of the rivers that was either married or a child, believe married to Okeanos, the great like ocean of oneness that surrounded the earth in that time, or in their stories. And Tethys like splits the waters into many different directions. So you could see that being a very Gemini type of experience, like one body of water splitting into many different tributaries to explore. So a proliferation of options in this Jupiter-ruled decan. Okay, so we had a Saturn-ruled decan in the 3rd decan of Taurus. Jupiter rules this decan, but Jupiter in a Mercury sign is a little bit uncomfortable because Mercury likes to explore options, and especially young Mercury in the air sign of Gemini, right? And when we have Jupiter there, it's just an expansion of all the options, and we may feel like we just can't get some traction because we're exploring so many of these options. So that's why we see this paralysis by analysis type of energy, right? This proliferation of options that may make us feel a little bit stuck, a little bit bound, like this figure in the card here. Ani says, I hope you saw my super chat an hour or so back. Oh, thank you, Ani. I appreciate you. Maybe I did not. Thank you for your generosity, friend. And if, oh, yeah, so, oh, there you go. Remote camping, bask under a lunar eclipse. Yes, that's right. So you're going to be traveling. Yeah, and if you all want to make a donation to the work I'm doing here, you can buy a super chat or a super sticker with a little $sign in the chat there. I super appreciate all of you. Even after the fact, there's a thing called a super thanks, which is a little heart on the video after the fact, or you can buy me coffee at buymecoffee.com. So thank you, Ani. Thank you, everyone who's contributed today. I really feel that appreciation, and I'm really grateful for all of you. So Gemini 1, splitting of attention. Austin Coppock, I believe, calls this the apple of Eden, where Eve takes a bite of the apple, and that oneness is split into awareness of dualities, just like the ocean is split into many tributary rivers. We may be starting to become aware of the dualities in our life that are difficult to reconcile. Sometimes there's things in our life that are at cross purposes, and it is hard to make them work together harmoniously. That's just part of life, is we have competing interests every once in a while. And this could lead to some self-doubt or questioning of our path potentially. So some questions you can ask yourself during this Gemini season. What choices are before you? Are you thinking yourself into a state of frustration? Okay. I do this with Gemini Venus sometimes. Is I used to, instead of engaging with a homework that I had or something, I had so many options. I was so perfectionistic about it that I would just stare at the ceiling for hours on end, just instead of actually just doing it, which would alleviate my suffering. So sometimes instead of thinking it to death, just taking one small action can really be helpful to get you out of this energy. Do you need more information, or do you need to quiet the mind? That's an interesting question too. Oftentimes we can think that we don't have enough details. We haven't looked at enough options. So another thing that people do with Gemini placements, and this is, I'm speaking from experiences, instead of just buying the first thing that looks like it'll work, they'll go shop for, every single option, and to find the perfect thing. And that can be really frustrating. I think the air signs, I really agree with Adam Ellenboss on this, is that the air signs are really the perfectionists of the zodiac, in my opinion. Yes, we associate that with Virgo and things like that, but Virgo actually has an ability to see the flaws in things. It wants to remedy those flaws, but I think that there is some acceptance in Virgo of the material process, whereas air signs are very idealistic. And when you're idealistic, you're getting attached to the perfection of form, not the actual thing itself. So it can be very difficult for any material thing to live up to the idealism that happens when we have placements in air signs. This is true for Libra. This is true for Aquarius. Libra has a perfectionism about how they should relate to one another, and the balance and the beauty and things of that nature. Aquarius's perfectionism is about how humanity should be, how society should be organized, which is a Saturnian quality. Then here with Mercury in Gemini, this perfectionism could be related to the intellect and our exploration of all the different options and the questions that we're asking and things of that nature. So think about that. Are you being a perfectionist on some level in Gemini season? What do things look like from the opposite perspective? That is the value, I think, of Gemini, is being able to see things from someone else's perspective, to release maybe some of the potentially dogmatic thinking of its opposite sign, Sagittarius and Jupiter, where a lot of times there's a Jupiterian negative quality of being like, I know this and everyone else should feel exactly the way I do, like this enthusiastic fire. Whereas Mercury says, well, really? Really? There's a skeptic energy, like, oh, well, what if we think about it from this perspective and this perspective? And the way that I like to deal with that axis of information is, how can you deliver Mercury, Hermes, the message, the passion, the philosophy in a way that other people can receive it, which is also Hermes. So a lot of Gemini is not really about talking. It's about listening. It's about tuning into what the person that you're interacting with, how they might be able to receive your message most effectively and most efficiently. And oftentimes we sometimes misconstrue that as not being honest or lying, which can happen in the extreme. But it also, a healthy Gemini is finding ways to create connections between worlds, between people, between communities, between ideas that seem disconnected. It's finding the pathways between them, the crossroads. So this is also a sign that is concerned in the major arcana, the Lovers, with the ethical consequences of a choice. So you have choices that you may face, and you may have some moral questions. In this decan, we do have, it's very close to the fixed star Aldebaran, although it has precessed into the second decan. But this used to be the decan where Aldebaran was, which is all about integrity and moral fortitude on some level, and the consequences of stepping outside of that on some level. So how can you translate essence in a way that it can be received? That is a question to ask yourself during this period of time. Okay. Oh, we got the Norwalk folks are Geminiing it up, communicating. Mercury's in it up with others. Oh, so good. This is why we have a wonderful community here. People finding ways to share space and things like that. Yeah, Ani says the organizers are also worried. The COVID precautions are steep. Well, as they should be, Ani. I'm glad to hear that, to be honest with you, because many factions of our society aren't taking it seriously. And I personally believe that that is a huge mistake. I do think we do have to find a way to make these gatherings safe instead of just like completely isolating for the rest of time, because I don't think COVID is going anywhere anytime soon, to be honest with you. Unfortunately, we have to find ways to adjust and to adapt. And I'm happy to see those things being put in place. I think from my own perspective, simple things you can do if you're going to something like this: wear your mask. If you're feeling sick, don't go. If you are concerned about your health, wear your mask. Do more things outside if you can. And I think that the main thing, and my solution for a lot of this, is advocate for changes in how we treat the air in these indoor spaces. We have to update our HVAC systems to be able to account for some of these things. If you aren't familiar with this, look up the hashtag DavosSafe on Twitter or on your social media platform of choice, because the Davos conferences are where a bunch of billionaires and rich people get together, and the safety precautions that those rich people had were so extreme. They had like UV lights, they had like a bunch of like, air purifiers throughout the whole thing. You had to take a test before you came in. Masks were encouraged, but they had all these, things in place to keep it a safe space for these people who obviously were still concerned about it, but had enough resources to find a solution. So I think that if we advocate for those types of solutions in our schools and in our places of work, things of that nature, we will be able to move forward in a much healthier and safer environment, rather than just neglecting it and pretending like it's not a thing and ignoring it so that the wheels of capitalism can keep spinning. And now I will step down from that soapbox. But again, Ani and Jenny, take care of yourselves and be safe. It can be a wonderful experience, but I will tell you, I had friends that went to Norwalk last year, and they did have a COVID outbreak after that conference, and many, many people got sick. So just protect yourself as well as you can. And that's the end of my public service announcement. So let's go back to the chart. I hope you're all doing well out there. I don't mean to be controversial with those things, but if I have to err on safety, if I have to err on the side of safety rather than on the side of ambivalence, that's what I will do on this channel, because I care about all of you, and I care about you being safe, and I care about you having a good experience. And I just hate to see people having challenges that could potentially even be long-term because they're not, because of what they're being told and things like that. So, and again, I'm not the final authority on any of this, so you can take my opinion or you can leave it. I think that that's okay too. All right, let's go back to the chart. I don't claim to be some expert. And I don't like the folks that have gotten real conspiracy theorists about all this stuff and think that they know better than everyone. I just err on the side of caution because I'm that Cancerian mother type. Okay, let's get back to this astrology here. So we've got the sun moving into Gemini on May 21st. You can see that movement here. And immediately the sun is going to make a trine to Pluto. So that tension that we felt with the sun squaring Pluto earlier in the Taurus season is now becoming a trine aspect. So we might be able to find innovative solutions to some of the collective challenges that we're working through exploring our options, through having conversations, through talking about this. I think that's one of the reasons I think it's important for me to continue to talk about some of these things, especially when we have people that are going into situations like this, is if we don't discuss it and have the conversations, how are we going to find solutions, right? It doesn't mean that we have to, bury each other because they have a different opinion than us. We just need to be able to communicate with one another. So the Sun-Pluto aspect, that's a trine. It's a positive aspect. It's something where we might be able to start making changes through an intellectual enthusiasm, through an airy charisma. I think this aspect can give us potentially being able to find multiple alternatives to some of these social challenges. And if this is part of the NORWAC experience, I honestly think that might be pretty fun. Like there might be some really nice in-depth conversations potentially. Oh, KP 1231, thank you, friend, for the super chat. Sag Rising saying thank you for your generosity in these live streams. Well, thank you, friend. And I believe you're down in Cleveland, so hang in there in Cleveland. Hope things are going well down there. Go tour the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for me. I've been there once. It was pretty cool. I was there when the John Lennon exhibit was there, and I am a big Beatles fan, so I really enjoyed seeing all that and have a nice souvenir from that with his poetry and stuff. It's pretty cool. And I went down to the flats and all sorts of things. It was a long time ago, but Cleveland's a cool place. If I'm remembering that correctly, KP1231. If you're not from Cleveland, I apologize. So we've got that trine between the Sun and Pluto. And then when we get to May 22nd, we are seeing a sextile between the Sun and Mars. So a positive aspect between Mars and the Sun here, where our exploration of options may have some fuel, right? So we may be trying to vie for the spotlight on some level, but that competitive energy might feel inspiring. Oftentimes, if you go to one of these conferences, if we keep it with like NORWAC, you see what other people are doing and you get a different perspective, and that can really ignite some passion in your own work and give you some great ideas for how you want to engage with the astrological community and things of that nature. I mean, it can get competitive at times, and sometimes it's difficult to, I think one of the things that I've struggled with sometimes in astrological work is that we're all dealing with similar aspects, and oftentimes we're talking about the same things or teaching the same things. But what I will say is that you can say it in your own way, and you can come at it from a slightly different perspective. And it's always going to be, this knowledge is always going to be filtered through your own experience. And the way that you describe one thing may, even if it's a similar technique, could resonate with someone in a slightly different way just because of your own experience. So I that's one of the things that gets me through the day with that. But if you do go to one of these conferences, I would caution you not to get overly comparative and competitive with your colleagues there. It's very easy to do. I'm, like I said, I'm not innocent of that. I tend to look over my shoulder sometimes with a Leo rising, like, oh, am I doing everything I should be doing, or what's that person doing? But again, you live into feeling comfortable with who you are, and as you're going through this aspect, learning to just appreciate your own delivery can help you in whatever situation you're in. Even if it's not an astrological conference, trying not to overly compare yourself to others could be part of this aspect too. But it could be beneficial for exploring new ways to engage with the public and put yourself out there. Fallon, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate you, friend. So we've got all our Midwesterners in here. I think Fallon's, Fallon, are you in Indiana? Right? I love my Midwestern crew that stops in. So we get to the 23rd, and then we have the perfection of the square between Mars and Jupiter. So we're still going to be feeling this T-square tension, but now we have a combination of two traditional planets and that aspect perfecting itself, okay? So that's going to start separating after the 23rd. We're going to feel that tension of Mars and Jupiter coming together in the first decan of Leo and Taurus, respectively. So here's some of the notes I wrote down for this aspect. So expansive ego energy. And again, remember, it's in T-square with Pluto, which tends to blow things out of proportion itself. Self-glorification and self-aggrandizement. So some of these things are from Ren Butler's very good book, The Archetypal Universe, which I really love. Nationalism and competitive markets, okay? Heroic quests, keeping in mind that Jupiter's in the overcoming position, which is positive for softening some of the maybe overly competitive aspects of Mars in the first decan of Leo. So cooperation could be important around this period of time. Try not to let your anger get the best of you. If you find yourself in a competitive situation, try to take your time, okay? Slow down a little bit. You'll find honor and merit through the actions of planning for your future rather than just getting upset if you're not getting the attention that you want. Jupiter is saying, you want to be recognized, put the work in. You want to be recognized, produce something, right? And you can produce it at your own pace. It doesn't have to be at everyone else's pace. Another thing you'll get into if you're new to astrology, sometimes it can be frustrating when you come into alignment and into contact with people that have been doing this as a career for a decade or more, right? And you're just starting out. Like that was part of my experience at UAC. Is I was a traditional astrology baby. I'd been kind of casually exploring, and for me, casual is not that casual, but I was an amateur modern astrologer who had just kind of had his brain cracked open by Demetra George and Chris Brennan with their books and podcasts and Austin Kopic's work after that about the potential of traditional astrology and its organization. And that brought me into contact with Adam Allenboss from Nightlight Astrology and really resonated with his delivery. So I chose to study with him. And seeing the transitioning from one career to another was in the middle of life, at middle age, at like 35, I guess you could call it. And I guess it's middle age. I don't know. It's all relative on some level. But starting anew after your Saturn return, it was a little bit humbling seeing how intelligent all these people were and how much stuff there was to learn. That's what surprised me so much about traditional astrology is it wasn't, or just astrology in general, actually just being a part of the community. I'd been doing it so much on my own. I didn't know that there was like a group of people that you could talk to about. And each one of them had such an amazing perspective. And there was so much information about philosophy, about, the technical aspects of it, about like the integration with tarot and the decans and the fixed stars. There's so many layers to it. And it can be intimidating at first. But again, everyone is on the right timing for who they are and where they are at. So accepting yourself for where you're at and having patience with the process, I think, is a good lesson for Jupiter squared Mars in these particular decans, because it's very easy to compare and to get frustrated with it. And we're all, here's the thing. There's always going to be someone who's been at it longer or seems like they have more perspective or resources or attention. And there's always going to be someone who's probably looking at you and saying, wow, you have more resources and attention and experience. It's so cyclical, So what I would suggest is if you're new, have the humility to have beginner mind and accept help and learn new things and be curious. And if you're experienced and you have more resources, cachet, be generous with that, and recognize that you once were in that position as well, and give to those that are just starting out without arrogance, and with recognizing that they are just a reflection of you at a different stage of the journey. So that's how to enter into astrological conference land and not get all bent out of shape, I think. So when we get to the 26th of May, we're heading around the corner towards the end here. The 26th of May, we have a sextile between Venus and Uranus at 19 degrees of Cancer and 19 degrees of Taurus, respectively. So this could be some kind of nice little diversion that comes up, an innovative relationship solution potentially, a nice break from your routine that could happen. This isn't like an earth-shattering aspect, but it could be something that is very nice that happens. Venus is also the host of Uranus, so there's a positive communication and line of communication between those two. So maybe just take a little break on this Friday and do something a little bit out of your routine that is in support of your self-care. And maybe it's a nice domestic kind of staycation or stay-in movie night or something like that. That could be a nice experience potentially. When we get to the 26th, again, continued, I'm just looking at the top of my page, on this same day that we have this positive relationship between Uranus and Venus, a more important, I think, potential turning point is happening. First of all, we're heading into a first quarter moon, with the moon moving into Virgo shortly hereafter. But what I'm showing you on the screen here is a square between Mars and the nodes. And this is a traditional concept called a planet being at the bending of the nodes, okay? And we have a north bending and a south bending. In this case, Mars is at the south bending, where it is, instead of moving away from the north node here, it is starting to move towards the south node. So it's this shift away from the north node in Taurus to the south node in Scorpio. So I think that this is sort of a turning point where we're moving towards release. And I want you to pay close attention, not only to the Leo part of your chart, where this could be a point of release, a separation of some sort, a turning point in the journey. But I want you to pay extra attention also to the Aries and the Scorpio areas and topics of your life, because you're going to be seeing Mars at a turning point. In this Leo rising random chart, I'm sorry I keep using the Leo rising chart, but Mars will be heading towards maybe a release in the fourth house of home and family, and potentially in long distance journeys or like philosophy or belief system. So maybe there's changes, and this is one example, in your home due to your belief system. Or maybe there is something where a change in your family life leads to a belief system change as well. And that's common. Like, if I know for me, like, losing a parent changed my worldview on some level. It completely changes and shifts your reality. So this could be something where we're moving towards that south node composting energy. And again, in Western civilization, we have been trained that more is better and more is more, and continual growth. But in other parts of the world and in balanced human viewpoints, times of recession and times of lack and times of letting go are healthy. The south node is revered in Eastern philosophy and Eastern culture because the goal was not to accumulate more stuff. The goal was to release attachments. So if you view it from that perspective, this could be a beautiful bending of the nodes as well. Okay, so releasing old grief could be part of this as well. a turning point towards release. So then that takes us to the 27th, and there is our last quarter moon. So you see the moon at 6 degrees of Virgo and the sun at 6 degrees of Gemini. They are in a square. The first quarter moon tends to be a challenge or a crisis of bringing something into manifestation. So you potentially have a lot of options that you're exploring, but now it's time to whittle them down into something practical, to infuse those ideas into a material body, and to learn the skills necessary to be able to manifest. So I really think this is a reskilling first quarter moon, where you're like, you know what, I've got all these ideas, but I really need some more information. I really need to just get to work on the ideas too. So don't be afraid to just stop thinking about it and just start doing something. And if you make mistakes, you can always change things later. But expansion of options versus scaling back and harvesting, work, reskilling, new skills needed to explore your ideas, bringing some practicality back to the explorations could be part of this Virgo moon square. Okay. And then the final aspect of the month, non-lunar aspect, happens on the 28th. And this is a square between the sun in Gemini and Saturn in Pisces. So if I move this back a little bit, you can see here is our square almost exactly between Saturn and the sun. So now I've got a Gemini rising chart for those of you at home. Now, this to me is everything I said about Jupiter being in the overcoming square to the malefic is equally true of a malefic when it is in the overcoming square to another planet. So it is a little more challenging. Saturn is really the experience of this last few days here is not just the square between Saturn and the sun, but it's kind of a little bit of a T-square action between the moon in Virgo, the sun in Gemini, and Saturn in Pisces. So there's some tension in the mutable areas of our life. And if you're a mutable rising sign, like this Gemini rising, you're probably going to be feeling a lot of tension. This aspect is telling us that, again, we cannot explore every possible option. It's just not practical. We could have a desire to socialize with the sun in Gemini versus a strong, maybe even stronger desire to retreat into our own personal imagination, to leave societies on some level. I'm seeing a lot of astrologers in particular on social media are like, I'm overwhelmed with the daily grind of producing content in this late stage capitalism environment where my value is only recognized by what I produce, which I totally feel. And a lot of them are like, I'm taking a break, I'm going to do less. And I think that that's healthy. I think that on some level, these platforms are benefiting from telling us that we have to constantly create more material that benefits them, or they're just going to bury us underneath the algorithm, so to speak. That can be a lot of pressure. I've gone through periods of time where I was just like, this is so relentless, astrology and the preparation for it, and the aspects just keep on happening. And you feel like you're not producing one day or 1 week, that you're just going to be forgotten in this stream of consciousness that never ends. But that's not necessarily true. You can take breaks. You can choose how much you want to engage. You can always come back and rebuild things. I, at one point, had to reevaluate how I was engaging with videos. Like, I mistakenly tried to model myself after a different method of producing content that I just could not keep up with. Like, I tried to produce a video every day and it just didn't work for me. It wasn't my energy level is not that, and I started to feel very unhealthy. And I switched it up to where I was doing just a video every a week. And the way that I reconciled that is I do these longer form videos, which I hope is a similar amount of content packed into one time showing up. And for me, that really helped me with not having to create promotional material for every single tiny 20-minute video. That was just the overwhelming part about it. It wasn't creating the video itself. It was all of the extra stuff that goes into that. And doing that as a one-man band was just too much. And so you have to figure out at this point, what pathways can you explore? How much is enough? What is truly meaningful for you? Because Saturn is really requiring that right now. It's saying, what is truly, truly bringing you meaning? What is the weight of your spiritual responsibility? And how is that maybe interfering with your desire for novelty or exploration? This could be an inhibiting aspect potentially, or we're frustrated that we can't move forward. I can anticipate like my own personal feelings, like depending on how much I choose to engage or not with NORWAC, feeling a little bit like I'm missing my community, and maybe I need to reevaluate some of the way that I move through the world potentially. This is just me brainstorming, but this could be feeling, you could be feeling some isolation or feeling exiled from your social networks for various reasons. Some things might be through belief system. So that may be up for evaluation on this, reevaluation. These are both Jupiterian and Mercurial domiciles facing off with one another too, with Gemini and Pisces. So there is this, those two planets are opposite kind of energies in the Thema Mundi type of evaluation. Jupiter wants to unify, bring things together. Gemini wants to kind of split things into different directions, like the Tethys splitting the ocean into many rivers. So this search for meaning could lead you to some kind of paralysis. You could be overthinking your dream. I think Saturn in Pisces in the overcoming position is really asking us to feel our way through. It says that thinking isn't going to unravel the mystery. Feeling, being, allowing. I think that's the energy to lean into. I always look to what the planet in the overcoming position is asking for in the chart, as far as what might make that square work out a little bit better. Okay, so that's May. How you doing? Hello again. Oh, friends, we've gone on a journey, haven't we? We have gone on a journey, 3.5 hours. Well, let's wrap it up with some advice from both the I-Ching and an animal spirit. So the I-Ching hexagram that I got for you this week was number 55, or for this month, I should say. And 55 translates to abundance, zenith, splendor, fullness, living in the present, making the most of the good times. Think of the zenith as the height of the tip or the top of the mountain. You've climbed up the mountain and now you're at the peak, and now you have to figure out how to get down the other side, right? And maybe with this zenith point, you want to just enjoy the view a little bit more. You need to rest a little bit at this peak, take in all the beauty that surrounds you, the grandeur, the clouds, the long-term vision, and prepare yourself for the long journey back down the other side, because there's things on the other side that you may not be prepared for yet, and it's a long journey, and you need to kind of rest up on some level. So this is making the most of the good times, living in that moment. And there's 3 changing lines that are changing to hexagram number 1, which is all yang lines. It is very dynamic. It's creative, activity, yang force, decisiveness, strong action, going forward, exertion. So if we try to make the most of these good times and this peak living in the moment experience, that can bring us dynamic action and creativity and yang force. But there is some warnings in these changing lines. We have to be careful of that. Line number 2 says, abundance is screened so completely that no one can see the pole stars at noon. If one sets forth, he meets with calamity and distrust. But if one is sincere, that shoots forth like an arrow, and good fortune comes. So this is light hidden by an intense opposition. This, to me, speaks towards some of the things that might be out of our control with Taurus 3, but also the T-square with the fixed planets. There's some obstacles that may be obstructing your advance in a particular area of life, maybe through the Sun-Saturn square, maybe through the T-square with Jupiter, Pluto, and Mars. And it's not necessarily your fault, is what this hexagram speaks to as well, this changing line. It's important to be patient, maintain faith in your ideals, and it's going to work out eventually. But there's going to be a retrograde with Jupiter in Taurus as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. Yes, EK, Beth, we have been on a journey so far. Many people have left and come back and like, you're still here? Yeah, I'm still here. We're wrapping it up though, friends. So the next line that I got that was changing in this hexagram is line number 5. It says, beauty and brilliance come forward. Blessing and fame draw near. Good fortune. So when you read a hexagram, you read I particularly read from the bottom up. It unfolds like a story, right? It starts at the earthly part of the hexagram and rises towards the heavens. So beauty and brilliance come forward. People in your community, in this particular line, it speaks towards people coming forward to help you. So again, leaning into your community, not necessarily having to be such an island and hoarding everything for yourself. So be open to assistance. That's the ultimate humility, is allowing yourself to be helped. Humbly allow talented helpers to teach you what you need to learn. You don't have to have it all figured out. And some of the Gemini gets themselves in a lot of trouble when they try to pretend that they know everything. Because sometimes it's embarrassing to feel like we're a beginner, we don't know something. It's okay not to know something. So good fortune and rewards are going to come for everyone concerned if you open yourself up to assistance and be a team player. Now, line number 6, the top line, says, abundance in his house. He screens off his family. He peers through the door, lonely and abandoned. For 3 years, he sees no one. Misfortune. So this line talks about the zenith time frame. The abundance does not always last forever. Okay? The time of abundance has come to an end. The times of plenty are destroyed when people become selfish and uncooperative. This line is a warning. The 5th line is very positive. This shows us the potential of this hexagram if we follow its advice. But the 6th line gives us a warning if we don't. So don't be short-sighted. Release arrogance and obstinance, right? Share your blessings with others. You know, we're heading into fixed Taurus season with these fixed standoffs. A lot of times fixed energy is this closed fist. Open the hands up again. You know, be open to receive, be open to share, be open to receive blessings. Okay? Pride's going to lead to isolation if you're not careful. This could be the challenge of Mars in Leo, is if you feel like you have to do it all yourself, or you feel like you have to steal the spotlight, if you have to abuse others to get that spotlight, your victory will be short-lived. Because when people do unethical things to gain that attention and that spotlight, what you're doing is you are, by stepping on others, you're creating enemies. And you are planting the seed of your own future demise. This is we coming full circle when we talked about royalty and the monarchy. Oftentimes, if a royal over the course of history became selfish, you know, let them eat cake type of thing, what they're doing is they're sowing the seeds of revolution, and they're sowing the seeds of their own usurpation. So anybody in a position of power and privilege who is only serving the self is creating its opposite, right? It's creating their own downfall. So if you are in a leadership position, if you are in a privileged position, share your power. Share your resources. Share your spotlight. Uplift others on your journey. And you'll be amazed that the type of feedback that you get with that, rather than getting into this like dog eat dog competitive situation where we have a scarcity mindset where we think that there's only enough attention, there's only enough resources, there's only enough this or that, toilet paper, whatever. It's not true. The earth will provide if we allow it to and give it space to. So again, that hexagram's changing to dynamic, creative energy, right? If we're able to work together, we can be so creative. We can accomplish so much more together than just as individuals. So the animal that we are seeing here is the spider. And the spider is very creative. They weave webs of fate, right, to catch their food. They're very patient. They weave and then they wait. So you may be weaving your fate this month, but you're going to have to be patient. Make the web and then hang back a little bit. Do what is necessary and then let nature take its course. Be resourceful. Spiders are very resourceful. They are wonderful craftsmen. Like they make beautiful patterns. It's important to just start doing something physical with your hands. Make something. Taurus season is about making something. And it doesn't have to be grandiose. You can just doodle on a piece of paper. That can get you started. You can make a beautiful meal. You could bring some flowers inside and beautify your space a little bit. All those things will please Aphrodite. So a new creative project might be begun around this period of time. Spider is also good at recognizing what is toxic and what isn't. So this might be a time to get rid of some toxic people or situations or substances in your life as well, which I think really speaks towards the eclipse in Scorpio. So it might be time to cut ties. Maybe there's something that you've gotten involved in that really isn't right for you, and that's okay. By removing that element, you might find a new center of balance and a new way to promote healthy vitality and growth within your life. All right, friends, we did it. Saturday afternoon, Saturn's Day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, for spending your Saturday afternoon with me. It's such an honor to be here with you and to share this space with you. Thank you so much for your comments, for your questions, for your super chats. Please do me a huge favor, like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel and the newsletter. Give yourself a little gift. Give yourself the Decans of Taurus for 20% off if you want to do something else that can support my work. If you need help through eclipse season, my books are open, and I'd be happy to sit down one-on-one with you and work out some of these things. I put just as much preparation into every reading that I do into these live streams. I think I do like 5 or 6 pages for these marathon live streams, and I do at least 3 pages when I work with clients as well. So reach out and be safe out there. Be careful, be prepared, but also try to enjoy the good times too. Okay? All right, my friends, that is what I have for you today. I appreciate all of you. Remember, be kind to folks in your community, especially in Taurus season. It's Venus season. If you're comfortable with yourself and you learn to love yourself, it's so much easier to spread that love out into the world. So just be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself, and that'll make it a lot easier to be kind with one another. So that is what I have for you today. Take care, my friends. I'll see you the next time. Peace.